Well, good morning everybody. On behalf of the Deputy Provost and myself, officers and elected members, would like to give you a warm welcome to this meeting of Falkirk Council. First of all, could I say, especially for members of the public, that this is Wednesday. We have a fire drill on a Thursday, so if the fire alarm goes off, it's not a test. And if it does so, could you make your way to that exit over there, where you'll be shown to safety. First of all, can everybody up the back hear me okay? Fine, thank you very much. It's an opportunity now for mobile phones to ensure that they're switched off. Thank you very much. That takes us to the sediment. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
Deputy Provost Ritchie. Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
He is here, he's just printing off something.
Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. That takes us to declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read it out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Any declarations of interest at this time?
I'm a director of Falkirk Community Trust.
Non-pecuniary interest in the trust.
Yep, on the board of the trust as well.
Mr Moody, would you just like to clarify what the declarations of interest in relation to the trust means for the members? Thank you. The board.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The members are correctly declaring their interest as members of the board of the trust, but they are entitled to take part in the discussion on the relevant item that's on the agenda this morning.
For that clarity. Before we go into the order of business, just to advise Council that intend to take agenda item 8, the Falkirk Council Community Trust Joint Working in Culture and Sport Provision, after item 6, the Treasury Management. This is because I understand that there may be a long debate and a division on this item, and want to ensure that there's sufficient time provided. So everybody quite happy with that? So we'll be taking item 8 as item 7 and item 7 as item 8. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay, then that takes us to the agenda proper here. It's Minutes and Information Bulletin, item 3A. Minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on May the 8th, 2019. It's pages 6 to 12. Any questions arising from that minute? None? Can we agree the minute? Thank you very much.
Which meeting was that, Provost? Was that the last council meeting?
The minute of the meeting of the Falkirk Council held on the 8th of May.
Yes. At that meeting, the IGB plan was brought forward, and I raised the question about the leases of the club rooms at the flats, and suggested that perhaps social services could intervene in this particular process. I just wondered if Councillor Colley and Councillor Hughes had got together on this point.
Get together.
Okay, thanks for that, Provost, and thank you, Councillor.
Minutes and information bulletin, item 3A, minute of meeting of the Falkirk Council held on the 8th of May 2019, pages 6 to 12. We agreed that minute. Very much. Takes us to item 3B, minute of special meeting of the Council held on the 10th of June 2019, pages 13 to 17. Any questions arising from that minute? Can we agree the minute? Good. Takes us to item 3C, volume of minutes, volume 5, 2018-19. Any questions arising from the volume of minutes? Can we agree that? Very much. Takes us to item 3D, information bulletin, volume 5, 2018-19. Any?
Provost,
Yep.
members I'm sure will wish to join with me in congratulating it will note item 6.1 in the information bulletin and will wish to join with me in congratulating the Tampa Tenants and Residents Association and partners in receiving the Gold Award for the Tenants Participation Advisory Service and note that in actual fact they've gone forward for an excellence award through COSLA, and I hope that we will wish them every success in that approach. Thank you.
I'm sure all members will agree with your sentiments there. Thank you. Councillor McCluckie?
Provost, ask a couple of questions on
Could you give us the page, Councillor
item
McCluckie?
Page 16, deposit return scheme, the information bulletin. Obviously got some questions to ask about that. Obviously, have we done a poverty impact study in Falkirk on this strange scheme, Provost? Obviously, a normal family goes in there and buys a couple of cases of water and a couple of cases of juice for the wains, and suddenly they've got £20 odd, £30 there, an extra food bill. So as I say, I would like to ken if that study has been done. When you go to return the bottles, I would like to ken, do you get the same 20 pence if the tap's on your water bottle or no on? And if an iron brew tin, do you get the same money if the can's crushed? Then how do they get the scan it? We ken that they're not bringing lorry loads there from England to go there and get the 20 pences. As I say, to me there's a lot of questions to be asked on how this has got to be rolled out, Provost. I can see people, as I say, you're going to hear robberies in banks and you're going to say, is it Halifax or RBS? And they're saying, no, it's got to be the bottle bank. Ken what I mean? They're bringing in to get the 20 pence for the water bottles. Ken what I mean? And robbing there. And some old lady where they're not going to get a purse now, they're going to take the crushed iron brew cans to get the money for some drugs. So that's what's going to happen. I've got real reservations about how it's going to be implemented, how it's going to affect my constituents. Because I tell you now, the folk up my way haven't got £20 and £30 extra for a bill, bro.
Okay, well, maybe bring is it Mrs. Geisler maybe in to just maybe clarify the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, the questions that Councillor McCluckie raised, I think are questions that we've all asked, those of us who are dealing with this. The DRS scheme has obviously just been recently announced by Scottish Government, and the paper that's been produced, I'm happy to give you a copy of that, is quite general in its terms, as you would expect at the moment. As we say in our report, the expectation is that the scheme will be operational in May 2021. So a lot of the detail that you've described we're expecting to emerge in due course. But these are issues that have already been raised with Scottish Government in the consultations that we've been involved with. So I'll certainly keep members updated as things crystallise over the period.
Thank you for that update, and you take, Provost. As I say, it's the wee corner shop trying to build an extension for where it puts its cans so they're not getting broke into and that. It's obviously not one of Nicola's moves. She's got that illness, that independentitis.
Mr. McCluckie, it's questions at this time. Right, okay, we'll bring in the portfolio holder. Councillor Garner, want to make any comment?
Yes, just to make a comment. I managed to catch some of the questions. I didn't quite catch them all, so I apologise for that, Councillor McCluckie. I'm guessing all these questions have been asked, looked at in depth. I'm not guessing, I know that. I've been along a few meetings where we're taking best practice from the many other countries in Europe that are actually running this scheme very successfully. Scotland will be no different. I'm looking forward myself to this being implemented in Scotland before the rest of the UK, and I think the Scottish Government do need applauded with taking this approach. As I say, we are taking best practice from the many other countries, so we should have a model which is fit for purpose here.
Yep, thanks very much, Provost. The question in relation to page 5, it's headed up Head Teacher Recruitment, Identification of Potential Candidates into Headship. Now, bearing in mind that the problems that we've had in the past here in Falkirk, just getting candidates for head teacher posts and even deputy head teacher positions, I'm just curious, how many potential candidates do we currently have signed up to the into headship qualification? Because it's not very clear from the paperwork that we've got. There's one of the entries which is actually not showing anything for 2018-19 for primary at all, so I'd just like to know if there's a number attached to it.
Do you want me to come up there, or? In 18-19, we didn't have any primary heads in the into headship programme. I have asked colleagues this morning to give me the figure for the current year 19-20. What I would say is that the into headship programme is a programme whereby head teachers or prospective head teachers attain a formal higher education qualification. That's not necessary to become a head teacher. We run our own internal recruitment process and assessment centre. Oftentimes what happens is that head teachers, once in post, go on to do these further qualifications. So I don't think the two issues are particularly linked. We do have a situation where sometimes we have quite a small number of candidates for head teacher posts, but in the last 2 or 3 years we've been very successful in growing our own head teachers and progressing serving deputy head teachers on into head teacher posts. But I can get the information about the current year for Councillor Nimmo by the end of the day.
Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. If I could just go back to the deposit return scheme, and Councillor Gardner there saying that the Scottish Government should be applauded for being the first in the UK to implement this. This is fine, but we don't have any answers. Councillor Gardner didn't give us any answers. He just says we've been at meetings, etc. And to say that Councillor McCluckie says that, I mean, if you buy 20 cans at £5, that'll now be £9 if you put a 20 pence deposit on everything. How do we get that back? There's no answers. Okay.
And that's a direct.
Thank you. If both councillors want to give me a list of questions, because there was a lot there, I'll certainly get answers to all them, because there is answers to all the questions.
It's now Councillor Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Perhaps I could refer you to the performance summaries in pages 28 to 30. It shows a very good performance in so many areas, and certainly council and officers have got to be congratulated for the performance. One particular item, however, I think merits further comment. Page 30, ING 22, it's disappointing to note that the percentage of approved applications for medical adaptations completed has markedly reduced, and I would actually welcome some information and comment.
Would it be Mr. Gillespie that would come? I would just like to come to the front there, sir, so everybody can see and hear you. Thank you. And if you just tell us, because obviously members of the public don't know who you are. We know who you are, but members of the public don't. Thank you.
Provost. I'm Kenny Gillespie. I'm Head of Housing for Falkirk Council. The indicator you were talking, Councillor, about is it's very much a point in time when we carry out the actual figures that we return to the Scottish regulator. We are aware that obviously there is more and more need for adaptations, and it's something that we are working with very closely in a group that we call the Housing Contribution Group with our colleagues in the IGIB to look at streamlining the process. We're very much that there's issues where that can be what I'll call log jammed and moving some of the quicker adaptations through quicker, and it's making sure that we can assess them much quicker. Within the next 2 months, there is a report going to be produced to the IGIB from the Housing Contribution Group with proposals how we can streamline that process so that we can look at making sure that the more easily adaptations are done much quicker and that we have a more streamlined process of doing more of the greater in-depth adaptations, likes of renewable showers or walk-in showers or adaptations of widening doors and ramps as well. So we're looking for that to come down, but the figure itself is very much on the demand of the service rather than any changing processes that we've put in place.
Yep, morning Provost. It's page 36 on the pest control. And given that the pest control service was cut in the last budget, do we now accept there is a bigger issue regarding vermin in our area than we first anticipated? Mrs Geisler indicated to a colleague in an email that the new procurement service would be used for pest control services within for our own use. I'm just asking, does that cover council-owned tenants who are under council property?
Ms Geisler, thank you.
Yes, this relates to, this is not a procurement exercise for services for us to provide to others. This is a procurement exercise for services to be provided to ourselves. So if it were, say, an issue in a school or one of the council's other premises, then this would be the framework that we would
so you're saying
down on.
Not for council houses which are
not
council property?
Houses, not for housing. I mean, with my colleague here, but no, that wouldn't be for council tenants. It's for things like, as I say, schools or office accommodations. It's a service we would, and of course that service would require to be paid for.
Paula. That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, it's a couple of questions on the housing indicators, page 31. Indicator 31, gross rent arrears as a percentage of rent due has increased by 1.84% in the last year. That's a kind of worrying figure. I just wonder if there are any background to the reasons for this. And indicator 33, percentage of factored owners satisfied with the factoring service they receive has gone down from 90% to 73%, with a green arrow pointing an increase. I take it that's an error.
Provost, if I can go with the indicator, the factoring, the 90% was our target. It was not what we had previously. So that's why we're green. We're actually improved on our target from previous. That was what our target was. We're looking to attain 90%, but the previous year we were only about 50-odd% with our factoring. So we have increased that. Yeah, but happy to provide more details to local member on that, Provost. Okay. And the other question in regards to the gross arrears, the issue of that is we have our OC, where we have issues with the new system we have in place in regards to benefits. And when you look and get underneath the numbers of our rent arrears, we are actually doing much better of existing rent, pulling them back. But certainly with the issues that every local council are facing, with the new benefit system coming in, that is causing a lot of issues in trying to get that, and especially where people are moving from one job, stopping a job, going back onto benefits and back on, that is causing delays, and I'm sure members are well aware of the delays and the issues that we do have with that. But we are in a much better position than we had forecasted due to the work that we've been doing with our colleagues with finance and with housing, and compared to other local authorities.
Just quickly, Provost, I accept that one, and particularly in the factoring, but it's a bit deceiving there when you see a figure of 90, 73 and then a green arrow. I've been better putting last year's figure achieved rather than what last year's target was.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, then we'll get Councillor Reid and then Councillor Alexander and then Councillor Grant.
Myself again, Provost, if you let me back in.
We'll go to Councillor Alexander.
No, I'm quite happy. Always entertaining to hear, Councillor.
We'll go to Councillor Grant.
All right, okay. Thank you, Provost. Yes, of course it is.
Always, bro.
Okay, Provost, if I could go back to the housing indicator, I'm just slightly confused, so maybe Mr Gillespie, pages 29. So maybe Mr Gillespie could answer this for me. It's the percentage of the core actions initiated which resulted in eviction and the reason for the eviction. In 2018-19, it's not applicable, and compared to previous years, not applicable, and then it's got 14%. Have we never had one before? That's the question I'd like to ask there. And then, if I could come just to finish off, another direct question to Mrs Geisler about the pest control. One of our contractors that the council recommend that our constituents phone, because the council take nothing to do with them anymore when it comes to pest control, is Graham's Environment Services in Perth. I actually phoned them and they told me to go back to the council, and the council would then phone them. So there's a wee bit of confusion there. Okay, thank you, Provost.
Provost, this is a new indicator that's been asked by the Scottish regulator, so that's why I had nothing before.
Ms Geisler, the question about pest control contractors. Thank you.
Yes, I can certainly take that up with the provider. I mean, obviously the contract that we have, it's a framework document, so it may well be that they thought that the person was phoning on behalf of the council, so because the contract they have is with the council. But I can certainly look into that for you.
Councillor Alexander, we'll bring you in now. Councillor McCluckie can hold on. He's already been in. Thank you.
Again, it says page 31, Provost, and it's in relation to the issue of the rent arrears. Can I ask Mr Gillespie if how much of an impact the universal credit has had specifically in relation to the accumulation of rent arrears? We've all had the stories, Provost, of individuals coming to us who've had no money for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks and expected to live off the fresh air, apparently. We've all had the stories, Provost, of individuals who are...
Yes, that's okay.
Well,
fine.
With all due respect, Provost, there was a lead-in for all of the rest of the questions this morning.
Fine.
In terms of the issues that face the authority, what impact has the changes to benefit had, particularly the benefit I've just quoted, and particularly as it relates to the confusion that's caused by payments being made under housing benefit directly to the authority and payments made directly to the individual under universal credit?
Okay, thank you for that direct question. Mr Gillespie, thank you.
Provost, I'll answer as much of that, but happy to take more detailed question from the local member and some of the exact information that he's looking for. Speaking to colleagues in finance before today's meeting, UC has had an impact, as I mentioned earlier in a previous question. The biggest issue that we do have is that if somebody is in constant work, then the benefits will be of more benefit to them, probably between 12 to 15 months through the process. However, if they are, as I said earlier, it is having a great impact on them, is where they are changing or the circumstances change. So we are seeing that, and we're trying to do as much as we can to do as much support as possible. Where people have existing rent and where they are not on UC, we have seen an improvement on their debt and where they are managing their debt better as well. But certainly to get the exact figures and percentage of where it's impacting, I'm happy to speak to colleagues and bring that back to the local member. Provost.
I appreciate that, Provost. It is important that we're fully aware of the facts as it relates to this particular issue. Can I ask just exactly how as a follow-up question to that, how the consumer advice and our welfare rights officers are performing, because they are an absolute lifeline for so many in our community.
Provost, that sits in a different section for myself, but happy to come back to that. What I can say as part of the new housing structure, one of the things that we are doing, and that's where we have seen the positive impact, is about our neighbourhood officers being more frontline serviced, being there and building these relationships with individuals, and also looking at what the benefits they do have and where we can help maximise that, tying back into the officers that you just mentioned there, Councillor. So it's very much a council process that we're doing, making sure that all services are involved in that. But again, happy to bring that back from another service.
Thanks, Provost. It's page 79 in the hard copy, or page 81 online, and it's regarding the Walking to School initiative. Obviously, I'm delighted to see that the Take the Right Route scheme is continuing, and it's to be applauded. However, I'm just a bit confused. In the hard copy, it mentions an art-based programme and said that NADFly were invited to talk about delivering an art-based programme encouraging active travel. However, it seems to have disappeared in the online version. I wouldn't like to think that Larbert and Stennismuir were going to miss out on some unique artwork to encourage walking and cycling.
We'll try and get that clarified. Would it be Mr Naylor or Mrs Geisler coming in?
I think the issue seems to be one of a technical problem with the online version of the agenda. Certainly you're correct, the paper version does mention this, so I'm working from that at the moment. So I can assure you that this project, the contract's been awarded for this project, and it's a great project, and we'll be happy to talk to you more about it if you're interested.
Thanks for clarification, dear.
Provost, I've got clarification. I've got the electronic copy here, and it's mentioned it there in 2.1.
Councillor Binney, we're still, don't worry, Councillor McCluckie will come back. The people that hasn't asked, we'll bring them in first.
I'm still here.
Councillor Binney.
I've got a question for Mr Gillespie. It's just really clarification actually, and I'm trying to understand that. Percentage of tenancy offers refused during the year.
Could you give us a page number so we can all get to it?
It's page 30.
30, right.
And considering we have a huge number of people that is waiting for a house, I'm wondering, can you tell me, is this the first person that was asked? Because I do believe when people are offered tenancy, might be the second or the third person who actually takes this. So I'm assuming these statistics are for the highest priority person. This is how you work out these figures. And can you tell me the reason for why that has actually increased the number of people that refuse to take tenancy first time?
Okay. Thank you for direct questions like that. Mr Gillespie.
Yes, it is the first people who are offered the property who are most in need for the property. There is many reasons why they don't take the property. Some because if they're homeless, they're required to bid for a property, and obviously that can be one of the areas when they bid for the property, it may not be exactly what they're looking for, although we have a choice-based letting system. It may be when they get there themselves, they feel when they've looked at it, there is stairs, there could be things like that, or even just the general layout of the house, of the vicinity of the house does not suit their personal needs when they go, because they have a second bid that they're allowed to do. So they're basically bidding to see if they can, and sometimes they have a second and they'll use that second bid, but this is on their first bid.
Thank you.
Direct question, sir. It's in question previous asked by Councillor Blackwood and Alexander on the rent indicator. I would tell you the page, but my electronics is updating, Provost, so I've no paper, so you need to excuse me with that one. But as I say, on the indicator, how are we going to get a rent indicator when people can't pay the rent? There's the first question is, when did we change to only one person at the hub taking the money when there's big queues? When did we shut it at lunchtime when folk go in to pay the rent, right? And now it's closed, a big queue, and it's closed for lunch when people go in to go and pay. And the third question is, will they people still get a letter on Monday that can't get the rent when they go in on the Friday to pay their bill? Will we still get a letter for the council saying that they'll rent on the Monday?
Okay then, I think there was 3 direct questions there, and we'll get Mr Gillespie back up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost. As you're aware, the 3 hubs that we have was agreed by Council, and it's certainly the way forward. The idea of payment, there is many ways to pay your rent, and it can be online, is one of the ways that we're trying to do that. There is still outreach areas that we can certainly get individuals to pay their rent. Yes, they are, through agreed appointments, sorry, Provost. Yep. And one of the things I'd mentioned earlier that we're also in future looking to do as part of the housing structure and the way forward for Council of the Future is looking to see if we can do something electronically when we do home visits. And we feel that could be something that could be used by our neighbourhood officers when we're going in to do our home visits, and we're offering that one-to-one approach, that could be a benefit in the future. Provost.
Councillor Reid.
Yes, I won't be long, Provost. This is going quite a wee while. One of the contracts was for the provision of a ground floor toilet.
Can you give us a page number?
I wish I could. It's 71, but I'm not sure what it is in the...
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's not by itself.
Thank you.
The question, it's the larger question of disabled access to schools. I know our percentage of those achieving the target is very high. It's about 90%. But the toilets on ground floor is important because from a personal point of view, my nephew Ethan, who will be known to many colleagues on that side, had to spend the last 2 years of his secondary school at a high school that he had not attended for the first 4 years. I just wondered if there were any other such difficulties still existing in our schools, particularly the odd one from the Victorian times.
Mr. Naylor, would you like to respond to that question?
Certainly not aware of any current circumstances where that's the case. I think you're maybe referring to something that happened some time ago. But the level and detail of provision that we have across the estate through consortium arrangements and so on means that that sort of situation is much less likely to occur now.
Okay, thanks for that. Just one final point. The information bulletin is to scrutinise officers' work, but I think on occasions it's also to congratulate officers when there's an opportunity to do so. I had the opportunity of attending the Falkirk Learning Festival at Stirling University, run by the Collaborative, largely by Catriona Reid of Bonus Academy and David Mackay. It was a very sunny Saturday morning, but the place was absolutely packed with teachers, all keen to do better for their pupils. And if I could, on behalf of certainly this side, and I'm sure the other side, pass on my congratulations to everyone involved.
We all agree with the sentiments put forward there, Councillor Reid. Now, I'm looking at everybody. Councillor Grant, you've been in twice, but we'll let you back in for the third time for this direct question. Thank you, sir.
Direct question, Provost, page 89. Could please somebody tell me what out-of-home advertising means, please? Thank you.
Yes, this relates to advertising as well as out of home. It's things like advertising on bus shelters and billboards, and it's associated with their Take the Right Route or Active Travel initiative.
Takes us to item 4 on your agenda, which is question. There's none been submitted. That takes us right to the roll and action log, and we'll put you on to Mr. Moody. Thank you, sir. 18 to 20 on your agenda.
Yes, thank you, Provost. There's only one item scheduled for today's meeting on the rolling action log, and it appears on the agenda, so there's nothing, I think, outstanding on the log.
We agreed to the rolling action log? We agreed? Thank you. That takes us to item 6, referral from the Executive 18th of June 2019, Treasury Management Annual Review 2018-19. Mr. Smale will present the report, and it's pages 21 to 32 on your agenda. Thank you, Mr. Smale. You're coming up? That's fine. Have you...
Okay. Right, Provost, thank you. Good morning. My name is Brian Smale, Chief Finance Officer. The agenda item in question, the Treasury Management Report, is required to be submitted to Council consistent with the Code, which is in effect a statutory requirement. The actual report itself was given, I think, a fair airing at the recent executive. So I wouldn't propose to go through the report itself, Provost, with your agreement, but I'm happy to take any questions or points of clarification that members may have this morning.
Any questions in relation to this item? Councillor Meikle-John, thank you.
Provost, it's not a question. I think Mr Smale's right. There was a good discussion had at the executive. It's one of the key tools that we use with regard to our financial planning. As we're moving into a new format of financial planning, particularly for the longer term, it's going to be quite critical that we get our treasury management scheme correct. And I think with the changes that have been helpfully come from government that allow a bit of flexibility, particularly where loans are involved, then I think this is a good policy that will help take us forward, and I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Provost. And can I thank Mr Smale and his team for usual prudence when it comes to financial matters. This is part of a series of reports that came through, and they're all reflective. It does cover a couple of items, and as the Leader of the Council has said, it has came through quite extensively in the executive. So with that, I will happily formally second.
At the moment, we have an agreed capital programme, which is regarded as a prudent one. Suppose we were to be a bit more daring and borrow more money, would we be allowed to do so? Let's say we want another 20 million, for example.
The answer to the question, Provost, is that we do have powers under the Prudential Code, which we operate within, which requires our borrowing to be prudent, affordable and sustainable. And that's been in operation for about a decade now. Prior to that, we had a much more controlling environment with actual cash limits on how much we could borrow. But this new more flexible, liberal approach was introduced, and as I say, underpinned by the Council itself taking a view that any borrowing it did was prudent, and sitting below that, as I say, is it affordable? Can we afford the repayments? And is it sustainable? So these are important criteria, and it's perhaps interesting to contrast the position that we have under that regime with, say, the Scottish Government, that has a cash limit for its capital borrowing of 3 billion. So it has an amount, but it has a ceiling within which it has to operate. We don't have a ceiling in those same terms.
So to raise another 20 million would cost us how much annually?
Something, 20 million, something in the order of 600,000 per year over the period of the loan. But of course,
600,000 would give us 20 million. I take it it's up to each council to decide what's prudent and what isn't. This girl called prudence that I think Mr Brown spoke about quite a lot. So it's up to each council to decide. Yeah.
Council would form its own view.
Okay.
And obviously the auditors cast an eye over that critical as well.
Okay, thank you, Provost.
Takes us to the change in the agenda this morning, as was stated at the very beginning. We're now going to item 8, which is now 7th on the agenda. Falkirk Council, Falkirk Community Trust, joint working in culture and sports provision, pages 337 to 351 on your agenda, and the report is by our Chief Executive. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning. This report provides an update on the joint working activity between the Council and Falkirk Community Trust and proposes a range of measures to take forward culture and sports provision within Falkirk, in the context both of the Council's priorities and the medium-term financial plan. So, subject to members approving the recommendations in this report, it will be used as a framework by the joint working group to develop a 5-year investment and savings plan to be submitted by the Trust as part of their annual business plan later this year. And that will include high-level proposals for investment in key Trust-managed sites, outline proposals in relation to community management or transfer of existing Trust facilities, and proposals for asset rationalisation. These proposals will be predicated on an understanding that the Council will look to allocate significant capital funding to improve culture and sport assets. Provost, this is the third report I presented to the Council in relation to our work with the Community Trust. At its meeting on the 19th September 2018, Council agreed that the current arrangements with the Trust be maintained at the present time, and that actions be taken to develop a stronger and more effective partnership with the Trust. It was agreed that the Council would be updated on progress at this meeting in June 2019. The work was progressed by a joint working group consisting of elected members, representatives from the Trust Board and officers. The first priority in the joint work was to establish a shared vision and high-level outcomes between the Council and the Trust. And the outcome of that work was reported to the Council at its meeting in December 2018. At that meeting, the Council agreed the joint vision document and an interim work plan based on 5 core tasks. Progress in each of these tasks is set out at paragraph 3.3. And the most critical element of this was to take forward joint medium-term business planning to help identify a savings and investment plan for the next 5 years. And this was supported by a joint officer group comprising of officers from both the Council and the Trust. And this report focuses on progress made in relation to that task. The context, of course, for all of this is the Council's medium-term financial plan, which gives a savings allocation to the Trust over the next 5 years, as set out at paragraph 4.2. And that is a saving totalling 5.3 million through to 2023-24. This challenge clearly cannot be met through a continuation of the current approach of considering the position of the Trust and its business plan on an annual basis. It requires a longer-term approach, balancing investment, income generation, and savings, and thus the recommendation brought forward in December in terms of the work plan. Just in terms of some relevant pieces of context here, at paragraph 4.4, the report recognises the important health and well-being contribution that the Trust makes, and therefore the links through to the Health and Social Care Partnership. Now, that joint work is at a relatively early stage of development, but I think it is important that we recognise the potential contribution of the Health and Social Care Partnership in terms of the programme of work moving forward. Another critical link is into the strategic property review, and a set of principles for the delivery of the strategic property review were approved by this Council in December 2016 and are set out in the report. These promote rationalisation of the Council's property assets, focusing service delivery in a reduced number of better quality assets. The proposals set out in this report fully reflect the SPR principles, including the use of schools, the disposal of poor quality assets, and enabling community organisations to be more directly engaged in the management and operation of community-facing assets. Work on the SPR is underway at present with a view to reporting to the Executive in the autumn of this year, and this will provide an updated property strategy and action plan with proposals on the way forward for the Council's property estate, and will also inform the Council's future capital investment plans for its properties, including those of the Trust. Section 5 sets out the work done by the Joint Working Group towards specific proposals relevant to the Trust-managed portfolio. It sets out key considerations that provide a basis for these proposals, and in view of the challenge set, acknowledges the need to reduce the number of venues within the portfolio, improve the condition, quality, and suitability of the venues that are retained, and ensure an appropriate mix of culture and sports facilities is maintained. It recognises that culture and sport is a dual role in improving health and well-being and in raising the image and profile of the area as a great place to live, work, and visit. All of these considerations lead towards the conclusions set out in paragraph 6 of the report. And the core proposition that there is that there is a need to invest in and retain core culture and sport assets that can function with a significantly reduced level of funding from Falkirk Council at the same time as meeting customer needs. It is accepted that the area's culture and sports assets have been underinvested in, and the proposals likely to emerge as part of this work do seek to address that concern. It is anticipated that the sums involved may be in the region of £30 to £50 million, depending on the assets involved and the scale of improvement required. This investment would require to be supported by robust business cases for each asset and be clearly linked to the outcome of the locality-based reviews of asset provision arising from the locality planning workstream. In addition to the investment proposed for these existing assets, additional opportunities may be identified through the strategic property review, and there is in that context potential for additional partnership working as set out at paragraph 6.4. In respect of Bowness specifically, it is proposed that consideration be given to the expansion and reconfiguration of facilities to enhance community leisure provision at Bowness Academy, and the suggestion that that should be a priority for investment. This is due to the need to mitigate the potential loss of the recreation centre, which due to its deteriorating condition has been a cause for concern. The second proposition is that we should focus on the secondary school estate and invest in these as core community leisure assets. This approach would ensure that quality leisure provision is provided on a consistent basis at a locality level. And in that context, it is proposed that the priorities for immediate investment would be Braes High School, Denny High School, and as mentioned previously, Bowness Academy. It is also proposed that we should encourage community management input where asset condition is suitable. And the long-term ambition for this facility set out at paragraph 8.1 is for the community to take a much greater role and for the Trust to reduce its contribution and the associated costs. But the report also recognises that it is likely that some facilities would no longer be operational in their current form, and that in order to achieve the required level of savings in the medium-term financial plan over the next 5 years, a level of reduction in the Community Trust's estate is inevitable. The corporate property audit has found that the overall condition, suitability and versatility for assets listed in section 9.1 is very limited, and due to backlog maintenance issues and associated remedial costs, it would not be prudent to expect community groups to assume control of such assets. In relation to future library provision, a significant level of the public subsidy directed to the Trust is allocated to supporting and maintaining the library service. There are no proposals to reduce the number of libraries, but there is an opportunity to look at the integration of library provision with other facilities to ensure that the library service is enhanced through co-location with other services, future-proofed, and remains at the heart of future community provision. Such opportunities may exist at Falkirk, Grangemouth and Bowness, but it is also recognised that this may conflict with the town centre first principle. It is therefore intended to conduct a further exercise to assess future library needs in these communities as part of the locality-based assessments taking place. There may also be opportunities for co-location of libraries with other public services in other communities as identified at paragraph 10.4. Turning to the issue of consultation, this clearly needs to be a key element of the way forward. It will be important to garner the views of the current customers, clubs and organisations as to their aspirations in respect of the proposals, and this work must be aligned with other consultation being taken forward. In terms of these assets that cannot be brought up to a modern standard, it will be important to engage with existing customers in discussions to understand how these are likely to impact and, where necessary, to explore how their needs and aspirations may be accommodated. Proposals will be considered as part of the ongoing strategic property review and locality-based asset reviews, which also create the opportunity for community proposals to come forward. So, what are the next steps? Well, in line with the funding agreement between the Council and the Trust, there is a requirement for the Trust to submit its annual business plan in November each year. And it is proposed that this year, the submission from the Trust would include high-level proposals for investment in key sites to retain a good level of culture and sports provision as outlined. Outline proposals from interested parties willing to contribute to joint or sole management or transfer of existing Trust facilities, and specific proposals for asset rationalisation for approval by the Council. And the approach to that will be based on members' decisions today. So the proposal brought forward by the joint working group and incorporated in the Trust report will be informed by the recommendations agreed by the Council today. In terms of the financial implications, the report sets out proposals for an approach to both rationalisation and enhancement of the estate. Excuse me. It proposes capital investment to improve existing public assets, creating opportunities for enhanced income to sustain the operation of facilities going forward and to enable it to deliver savings. If there is not a programme of investment, then the options for meeting the savings target are much reduced and would inevitably focus more exclusively on issues around about rationalisation. That would bring with it risks of ongoing deterioration of assets, both unexpected and systematic withdrawal and closures, and reduced use of facilities, I think ultimately it would also make it very difficult for the Trust to meet the savings target that the Council has set it by 2023-24. In relation to the investment, as previously said, it will be necessary to undertake detailed assessments of the capital implications of the proposed investments in order to give a longer-term view prior to any specific investment decisions being taken. So in conclusion, Provost, this paper attempts to set out an initial plan of action to achieve a reduction in the service payment to the Trust by 5.3 million by 2024. It is in this very challenging context that members are invited to consider the outputs and feedback from all of the above work and agree the approach to investment being suggested. The subsequent work will confirm those sites that should be enhanced and developed for the longer term, those that might have greater community input to their management and operation, and those that might be closed or reconfigured for a different purpose. The outcome of this work will inform the Trust business plan for 2021 and beyond. The approach outlined in the report represents an opportunity to make a step change in the Council's approach to investment, alongside the very significant challenges which are a clear implication of the savings target which has been set for the Trust. In that context, the question for the Council is how we aim to safeguard and maintain the vibrancy and vitality of our most strategic and important facilities, how we optimise the use of schools, how we enable alternative service delivery options to involve clubs and other organisations to come forward, and how we empower and assist communities by encouraging greater community ownership and asset. And I don't underestimate the scale of that challenge or the difficulty of finding the right balance in terms of taking this forward. The primary aim of this report is to create a direction of travel in terms of the Trust and the joint working with the Council, and to set the context in which the next stage of work can be done and the more formal proposals brought forward to the Council later this year, taking account of the very challenging and financial circumstances. And it is in that context that I would ask members to consider the recommendations set out at section 2 of the report. I and my colleagues are happy to take any questions, of course, Provost, and I'm joined by Maureen Campbell, Chief Executive of the Trust, who will also be able to deal with questions which may arise. Thank you, Provost.
Before I open it up, I know that Councillor Coleman's had his light on for the past 5 or 10 minutes. I would just like to say quite clearly that we should not underestimate the importance of this document in relation to our communities. Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Just to give indication of an interest, as I'm a Director of the Board of the Trust. That's all.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I would agree entirely with the importance of this particular document and what it does for the Council as a whole in moving forward. We must remember that Council agreed in September 2018 that we continue to have the Trust as an arm's length organisation, but would work to bring the Trust and the Council closer together. And as the Chief Executive said, there has been some progress made in that happening, and a closer partnership is indeed developing. It was also acknowledged that there is a need for the Trust to be less reliant on public subsidy and in pressured financial times as we go forward. No one expects this to be easy, and it will continue to be challenging, but the option of doing nothing is not open to us, particularly if we wish to continue to protect areas within our
council services such as education and social care. We've seen with regard to the trust and our facilities what has happened by sticking our head in the sand over a sustained period of time. That said, there's been some progress with discussions with our health partners and the recognition that Falkirk Community Trust delivers programmes that can enable active healthy lifestyles, which fits with social prescribing and the public health prevention and early intervention agenda. And while at an early stage there has been some discussions around potential funding from for the Trust from the Health and Social Care Partnership, as that happens in other areas of Scotland, and it will contribute to the financial package to help sustain the Trust, as well as delivering a significant policy initiative for not just us but the whole of Scotland as we go forward. Trust being treated in the same vein as all other service areas with regard to the budget planning and the medium-term financial plan, and the proposals to take forward the business case is where we are with the Trust just now, to reduce the allocation from the Council by 5 million over the next 5 years, and that was agreed by members. It's been recognised that many of the facilities that the Trust manage on behalf of the Council have not had investment for a substantial period, and in order to make them more cost effective and run and attractive to service users, increasing the footfall and decreasing the reliance on public subsidy, there needs to be a range of interventions, including investment across the council area to increase the usage of the Trust facilities, and I think this approach should be welcomed. We have in the paper presented by Chief Executive, having worked very closely with the Trust's Chief Executive, a high-level strategy that sets out principles as a direction of travel to enable the Trust to develop detailed business cases that will cover the next 5 years and deliver the £5 million worth of savings, demonstrating where that investment could be directed and where that expected outcome would be. So at this stage there is no decisions being asked to be taken by members. All we're giving is a direction to the Trust on where we would want them to go and work up more detail. That is no different to what the rest of the council service is doing with our strategic property review and the rationalisation of assets being one of the key drivers to enable finance to be freed up in order to have that investment, something that all public bodies are going through, whether it be through asset transfer or release. It will act as an enabler, and this is how resources will be made available as part of the investment package, either directly or through prudential borrowing. We can no longer hide our head in the sand and we're between a rock and a hard place. We can either take ownership of the process and work with Falkirk Community Trust to develop an investment plan that retains and enhances sport, leisure and culture facilities within Falkirk, or we can stall, yet again, do nothing, which will result in a significant programme of closures by stealth. Our commitment to the well-being of our communities being broken and affecting inward investment and indeed the local economy, as within the Trust and all of the associated services there is a significant employment. Therefore, we need to look at making the best possible use of the existing facilities we've got, almost sweating the asset, but to do that we have to make them as attractive as possible for people to use them, and that requires us to invest. Access to schools. Schools are the keystone of our communities, and one of the barriers to developing the part of the leisure and sport offering is the design of some of the schools, as it does not warrant to having community access at the same time. Thus, the ability for the Trust to plan with any assurance a programme whereby there's a conflict between the school's use and the Trust's. Creating community access points that enables the security of the rest of the building opens up opportunities and ones that needs to be explored. And turning to our libraries, we made a commitment to not closing any libraries. That was very clear, and that was made by all members last year. We see libraries as being, again, one of the linchpins of our communities. And as they change in what they deliver, less through direct borrowing of books, but more through other services, that is to be welcomed, and indeed something that we should work towards. The libraries are no longer used for the traditional purposes, and looking at co-location and other services creates the anchor footfall, particularly for our town centres, and that's why we should be using that as a linchpin. It was agreed just last week that there would be some investment in Bowness Library, enabling disabled access to the upper floor for the community as a phase 1, and officers are currently working on a phase 2 that would see that retain as a facility that is keeping a vibrancy within the town centre that can be developed. We cannot continue to procrastinate. We need to move things forward. We have a plan of action, and yes, it's hard. We cannot continue the same approach we've taken over the last few years, as that has limited the development of the Trust and thwarted its ability to increase income, which could lead to reduce the public subsidy. If you look at where there's been successes in other areas of the country, facilities are more modern, more attractive, and that's what we are competing with, so that's why we need to invest. Today, what we're being asked to do is to take a decision in principle, a direction of travel and a statement of intent, to enable the Trust in collaboration with the Council and our communities, as they will have a significant part to play in the development of a 5-year plan, and including helping us identify funding for the investment. So I would ask that members give their serious consideration. There's no hard and fast decisions being taken today, but what we'll demonstrate is a vision and ambition, and one for the future that can touch on every part of our council area, and I would urge all members to get behind it. I'm therefore going to move the following motion, and I have copies here for members. Council acknowledges the positive collaboration that's taken place between the Council and the Trust in its work, and welcomes that this is an investment strategy. Agrees that there is a need to invest and retain culture, leisure and sport assets that can function with significantly reduced levels of funding from Falkirk Council and meet our customer needs. Agrees the investment proposals outlined in this report, with the details below, to develop further for inclusion within the Trust business plan to be submitted in November 2019. It agrees a programme of work to be undertaken to identify adaptation and improvement requirements at secondary schools and facilitate improved access, and agrees specific development proposals to be taken forward to identify proposals to enhance community leisure provision and access to Bowness Academy. Agree further work to be undertaken to assess the proposals in the context of the Council's capital investment plans, and notes the proposals to continue to engage with clubs and groups interested in increasing their role in managing assets, including Denny Football Centre and Hallglen Sports Centre, and to work with these groups to prepare a forward plan. We'd remove Denny Sports Centre from the potential closure proposals, and I note that is the first time that has come in front of members as a part of a closure proposal, and I think there's far more detail is required to members in relation to that, and the business plan process would enable that information to come forward. Notes that the intention to develop proposals in relation to the future library provision, specifically retaining Bowness and Grangemouth libraries in a town centre location, recognising their key role to support the town centre principle and regeneration. Notes the business plan will be predicated on the delivery of the proposals, and finally notes no decisions will be made until full business case is presented to Council for members to agree. I think we are in danger of thwarting our whole budget process by not having a vision and a forward-moving view of the Trust, because whatever is not gained through working with the Trust and the savings proposals will have to be sought elsewhere from within the Council, and I would urge members to think carefully in doing that. As I've said, that there is no decisions to be made today. All the business plans will come back for further scrutiny by members, and that is the point that they will have the opportunity to put forward alternatives, or indeed not agree, and then give a clarity to the Trust. I move the motion, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Garner, you seconding?
Thank you, Provost. Happy to second the recommendations held within this motion. Thank you.
As I said at the very beginning, we shouldn't underestimate these proposals for all our communities. And although at the moment they're only proposals, communities are already contacting local members in relation to some of the information that they've already seen. This has quite a lot included in it in the motion, and I think that there should be an opportunity for members to scrutinise this So I'm going to call, if you're quite happy, we'll call for how long do you think it would take? We'll take it as long as. Pardon?
Provost, can I suggest that we wait till the amendment?
Well, yeah, if you hold on, I'm just going to come to that one. Thank you. So what I'm saying is that we have an adjournment, but I believe that yourself, sir, Councillor Bissett, has an amendment. I think it would be maybe appropriate and it would be beneficial for everybody if you could maybe give us your amendment just now, moved and seconded, and give copies out to the administration. That then gives an opportunity for everybody to be looking at something instead of coming back in here. You move your amendment and then they're asking for an opportunity. So does that make sense? So if you want to move your amendment, Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just ask, Chief Governance Officer, is the administration now not supporting the report, or is this because it's a new motion?
I think the position is, Provost, that the recommendations contained within the report are the Chief Executive's recommendations to Council. The motion moved by the Leader of the Council is the administration's motion in relation to that report.
And Provost would like to take that recess now, if that's okay with you. No.
Provost, can I apologise for not intimating this earlier, but noting that the Pullman Hill Snowboard Centre has been specifically mentioned in the report. I'd like to declare now an interest member of my family being employed.
About 15 minutes, Provost.
Provost, in order we can discuss the motion, I wonder if the Leader would clarify just one point, or officers. That's the third point on the agrees the investment proposals outlined in the report. I'm not sure which investment proposals are referred to there, but I just, if that would maybe speed up things for us, Cecil, if you know.
There's a number of investment suggestions within the report being made, and the suggestion is that those go and be worked up and be brought back to members.
But at the moment there's not any price attached to them?
No,
right.
They don't have any prices, and that's the detail that we require. That's why we can't consider to take decisions at this time.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just to clarify exactly where we are, we've had a motion moved and seconded by the Leader of the Council, seconded by Councillor Gardner, and we have an opportunity now. We've been given a copy of a Labour amendment that's to be formally moved and seconded, so I'll go straight to Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to pick up on a point that Councillor Meiklejohn made regarding the 5-year plan, and the members supported the £5.3 million worth of cuts. At the Executive, when the 5-year plan came up, Labour put up an amendment, and our amendment was to take the 5-year plan to the full Council. So it was the Conservatives and the SNP that agreed that. We didn't certainly agree that. And also I'd like to say that Councillor Meiklejohn says these are £5 million worth of savings that are coming up for the Trust, in effect, they're effectively cuts. So we've had a look at the new motion that's came forward, and there's very little change from the original proposal. And this proposal is going to have a deleterious effect on communities, and we feel that it's important that we continue with our amendment. And our amendment reads, Council agrees to delay any further implementation of these proposals until full engagement and consultation takes place with communities, stakeholders and national bodies. Council recognises that some areas will be impacted adversely, and the potential cumulative effect on these communities needs further exploration. Council asks the Chief Executive to bring forward a report by the end of September. Thank you.
Yep, thanks very much, Provost. I'm happy to second our amendment. But before I do, can I just ask officers a quick question? Would that be okay, Provost? The question is in relation to one of the recommendations on page 339. It's 2.1D, and we're being asked to agree that a programme of work be undertaken to identify adaptation and improvement requirements at secondary schools to facilitate improved community access. The Chief Executive has already touched on this, and he mentioned a number of our high schools. I'm just wondering if you could maybe clarify what the actual position is and what discussions have been held between Children's Services and the Trust regarding public access to our sports facilities in our high schools.
There's been a lot of discussion. As you know, we operate in a number of the high schools already in the evenings and at weekends, and what we've been doing is talking to Children's Services and the head teachers about how we would improve the access, what the limitations to the current design and layout of the school is that is presenting good community access, and how that would be changed in the future. So there has been extensive discussion.
And just a follow-on to that as well, Provost, I take it from that that there will be no adverse financial effects on the Children's Services. It will be the Trust that will be bearing the cost of this.
The proposals, any requirements for change would be part of the investment proposal that would be coming forward by the Council and the Trust jointly, so it wouldn't necessarily be for the Trust only, but it would be part of the package of works that we'd be proposing in terms of the overall programme for change.
Okay, thanks for that, Provost. As I said, I'm happy to second our amendment, as I think it's the proper way forward in the circumstances. In my opinion, we need a lot more information on this before taking decisions that will adversely impact on our local communities. And I, for one, am not prepared to do that based solely on the information contained in this report. It's all very well having aspirations to expand and upgrade the Trust portfolio and the services that it provides, but with the SNP Scottish Government expected to slash a further £76 million from Falkirk Council's budget over the next 5 years, it makes you wonder how many jobs and direct services the SNP here in Falkirk will be prepared to sacrifice to prioritise the services of the Trust. Now, it's anticipated that the budget of the Trust, currently sitting at £11 million, will be reduced by just over £5 million in the years to come. It's quite simple, Provost. With half the money, you end up with half the service, and I don't support this, nor will the people of Falkirk, in my opinion. They need to be fully consulted on this. I'm happy to second the amendment.
Okay, thank you. We've got just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion moved and seconded, we've got amendment moved and seconded, and I'll open it up for general debate now. Councillor Coombs, thank you.
Thanks, Provost. As members will be aware, I take part in the working group as the Vice Chair of the Community Trust, and I'm therefore aware of the challenges faced by the board. However, today I'm speaking as a local elected member. I have many issues with the recommendations before us today, as have many members of the public, but I'll try and keep it brief as I go through them. About the positive collaboration, and I note that the main report and the motion by the SNP administration is very similar. So there is indeed a more positive collaboration between the Council and the Trust, and this has been helped no end by the fact that our SNP colleagues have forgotten their threat to do away with the Trust as soon as they get into power, and have instead taken their seats around the board table. I'm sure my former colleague, Councillor Mahoney, will remember these threats quite well. Recommendation B, the key line in this proposal, which says that there is a need to invest and retain culture and leisure, and there's lots of nice words before it, but the key line there is with significantly reduced funding. Recommendation C, the investment proposals. And I've used it before, and I've no doubt I'll use it again. This is a prime example of doublespeak. Don't mention the communities who will suffer the loss of their facilities. Just mention inclusion and investment. Recommendation D, the partnership with schools, has already been alluded to by Councillor Nimmo. Well, I hope that this does indeed come to fruition, because the Trust has for many years been seeking this partnership working. So I look forward to that happening. Recommendation E. It agrees that specific development proposals are taken forward to identify proposals to enhance community leisure provision and access at Bowness Academy. Now, The members in this chamber know exactly why that has been changed. I'm glad to see it. Well done, Councillor Ritchie. However, I go back to this. As I said, it's doublespeak. Talk about enhanced provision, don't mention the closures. Item F. In the context of the capital investment plans, absolutely, show me the money, because the reason the trust is being cut is because the council money is being cut. Item G notes the proposals to continue to engage with clubs and groups. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to use a phrase I've used before. What is being proposed here with the trust is the same as it is throughout the council. It's a DIY council where facilities and services are being cut. But don't worry, we'll allow you to do it yourself. How wonderfully empowering. G, the item H has now been changed. So the original report was about libraries. We've inserted the removal of Denny Sports Centre from potential closure proposals. Again, Councillor Blackwood is delighted about this, and I've no doubt that there has been a lot of talk throughout the night in the SNP group to the addition of this. Delighted to see the change of heart, however.
Final minute, thank you.
Back to libraries. Over the past few years, we have indeed seen libraries changing considerably. They'll be changed further when they move into the sports complex or other trust facility. And finally, the business plan will be predicated on this proposal, i.e., if you don't play nice today, there'll be worse to come. Now, before I'm accused of negativity, I have always believed in the trust, and I continue to believe in the trust. However, I don't believe that you can cut funding by half and not expect half a service. The trust management and staff have done a fantastic job increasing income and finding award-winning facilities, but half the money is half a service. And like all other council, we are accepting these austerity measures handed out by Tory and SNP governments. It's not an economic necessity. This is a political choice. Council leader just said we can't hide our head in the sand. Well, as well as threatening the existing of the trust previously, they mentioned that the last 10 years, all the cuts were due to the Labour-Tory mismanagement. Who are they going to blame now? There's nowhere left to hide. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you for that. Councillor Aitchison, light was on next.
Yep, thanks, Provost. Reading the report, Provost, I'm sure my colleagues for Bowness would agree the items included in it were very disproportionate to Bowness. Looking at dealing with the Town Hall, Bowness Recreation Centre, Bowness Library, which I'm very thankful that that's possibly being kept within the town centre because it's the lifeline in the town centre and it offers the opportunity for many people to go in. If it was elsewhere within Bowness, I think the service would be a disaster. We're talking about Kinneal Estate, Kinneal Museum. These are huge, huge areas. Voluntary groups couldn't possibly work with these. The amount of money it would take to continue the great work these community groups have done so far. They're a small band of volunteers that simply don't have the manpower to do that. So these estates would just become an absolutely no-go area for anybody. Bowness Town Hall is a huge asset. Again, a voluntary group couldn't possibly run that. It would be very difficult. The town hall is reasonably well used. Perhaps if the trust advertised it more, could get more groups into using it, perhaps the same as being done at the Dobie Hall in Larbert. Maybe the uptake in the town hall would be better. It could be done a lot better. Bowness Recreation Centre, I appreciate that it has not had much investment over the last few years. I did ask Mrs Campbell for figures the other day regarding the input for Bowness Recreation Centre, Greysmouth Sports Complex and the Mariner Centre, and unfortunately it'll be 3 weeks before she can give me them. But I think for people at Bowness, the figures would be eye-wateringly staggering. Mrs Campbell did refer to a meeting that had taken place the day before. I have no, oh, sorry, Miss Campbell, sorry. I have no idea what the meeting was, so I don't know if she realised who she was actually emailing. We did refer to a meeting that had happened the day before, but I was not part of that and I wasn't aware of any meeting, so I've no idea. So yeah, Bo'ness Recreation Centre, it has its faults. Moving it to Bo'ness Academy, I'm not particularly sure. The swimming pool, you being an ex-swimmer, I'm sure you'll appreciate that it's not the size of even a training pool. It would be very difficult to train in that pool. It's a 20-metre pool compared to a 25-metre, which would be used for training purposes, leading on to your competition, which is 50-metre pools. So again, you would see sports clubs not using that. There would be sports galas and things being used within it if it was moved to Bo'ness Academy. Another issue is safety. Is this going to be a standalone venture with its own entrance, as is being proposed to Kinglass, this nursery and the GP practice? There is a safety element for kids, pupils going in and out of the school, and adults going in and out of the sports complex, or are the facilities not going to be open during the day and only open at nights and weekends, when I would imagine a lot of our elderly residents within Bo'ness will be using the pools and facilities during the day. So again, we're not engaging with the public, we're pushing them away. Yeah, that's all. Just, I think it would be whether it was moved to Bo'ness Recreation to the Academy, it would be a reduced hour service, I would imagine, to the detriment of the Bo'ness community.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander next. Thank you.
Yes, Provost. David's raised a number of issues there that were heartfelt, and I'm sure that the detail of those can be worked through. Joan, as usual, Joan got the wrong end of this stick. Who introduced this policy? You did, 4 years ago. All of the issues of transfer of community centres, community halls, came up as part of your administration. The concerns that were expressed at the time with regards to the targets set by your administration for the trust, we questioned. We said that the targets were unrealistic, and the targets...
Excuse me, Councillor Coombs, give him an opportunity. What he's got to say, if you're not happy with it, when you speak, just...
The targets for funding cuts, for funding a realignment by the trust were yours, and what we saw is the failure of the trust to hit those targets, as we predicted on this side of the chamber. So let's get that nonsense out of the way. What we have for the first time today is an investment programme along with the usual asset realisation reports that we've had since 2015. So we have the prospect today of taking us forward to the business case, taking us forward to a date in November when we can discuss, between now and then, when we can discuss the issues with the communities concerned. And what have we got instead? We've got an amendment. And I'd ask you, David, in particular, to think whether the amendment that's been moved by the Labour Party today actually improves the prospects that you've outlined or diminishes them. Because what it asks for is effectively no decision to be taken with regards to facilities, the same as the motion. The difference being, Council asked the Chief Executive to bring forward a report by mid-September, or end of September, sorry. In other words, the 3 months, half of which time we're in recess, to produce a report that we said should come in November. That's something like 2 full months, the consultation, the development of the cases, lost. Should actually looking to move quicker than we are in relation to this particular issue. So if we're going to give the officers a chance to bring forward reports that meet our expectations and meet the desires of our community and meet the needs of the community, because there was no opportunity in the past to look at the prospect of investment. It was all about savings. It was all about savings. We'll save this, we'll save that. No prospect of investment.
Final
This
minute,
is the first
thank you.
opportunity we've had to look at the issue of investment. Investments are very, very important because the facilities that we know that are deteriorating, we know that they require urgent investment. We know that they require, if they're recommended for closure, we know that we're required to look at the issues of what provision is within the wider community. And if there is no provision or inadequate position, then we have that responsibility to act. But you can only act if you've got the resources. And you can only get the resources if you follow the example that's contained within the report. That's why the Labour amendment is vacuous. That's why it tells us nothing. It's just a mere attempt to get through today, create a division, and move on. We won't have any answers in November either.
You wind up, please,
I was
sir.
hastening to add, because the history of it shows that there's been no desire, no investment in these communities, particularly Bowness. We look at Bowness and there's been no commitment, no facilities developed, no case developed during the 10 years when Labour ran the council.
Wind up, please, Councillor.
That runs contrary to what's happening today, runs contrary to what happened in the last SNP-led administration, and it runs contrary to the very principles that you say that you're arguing for. So I would respectfully suggest, Provost, that the amendment adds nothing to the process. It merely brings forward, with 2 months, a technical report and cuts the time that we have to develop these reports and develop alternatives where there's a need. And that means cutting down the amount of time that we speak to the community, and that's unacceptable.
Thank you for your input, sir. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Provost. The amendment by the Labour make it quite clear that, in actual fact, the community involvement is such a material situation that has to be addressed and is not addressed within the motion, which in actual fact provides very little information. Indeed, it does, for example, refer to a programme of work and investment proposals which are not in actual fact given any detail which could be considered at this stage. The point of community involvement is very important. The Councillor Reid, in his question at a previous item, really in actual fact hit the nail on the head, that we're talking here about capital investments which would not only involve annual commitments which would be considerably beyond the present ability of the Trust to address, but would also providing a capital commitment which I understand is in terms of 20 million, etc. And remember that capital has to be repaid as well, and there is no opportunity within the proposals to expect that in actual fact the Trust could address these commitments. As far as we're concerned, the whole paper requires considerably more time to investigate. The business plan as such provides no, in actual fact, financial details to give us the comfort of knowing that the direction of travel is indeed an appropriate one at this stage without much further investigation. And in actual fact, I can support the Labour amendment.
Provost now, thank you.
Was first muted. I'm not a lover of the Trust. I wasn't a lover of Trust. Didn't think we should have went down that road, but other people thought differently. So around about 4 or 5 months ago it came forward again. And again, everybody agreed. Let the Trust get on with it. Bring these proposals, have a working group. That's what they've done. There's councillors been on this working group, and I don't even think they knew what was actually coming forward, going and speaking to the ones that was on the group. That's what's wrong here, okay? That's what's been wrong. This is what's caused so much anger and upset within our communities. But we are where we are, all because we went into the trust. Now, I'm not blaming anybody. We are all to blame for this. Okay? So I'll get on to what I'm actually going to say now. Okay? Right. First, the Bowness Library. I'm actually happy that it's going to be in the same location as where it is. It's going to be in the town centre. It's going to be within the town. It's going to have £1 million getting spent on it. That's great news. Anybody that can turn around and say that's not great news, well, sorry, very different to me. Okay. The Recreation Centre, when I first got told about this on Friday, what was proposed, like the majority of people in here, actually I'd say all the people in here, it was frightening to actually see what was going to be happening. After speaking to officers on Monday, what's going to be happening, I feel a bit more settled, because it's going to go to consultation with the public. The Bowness public are going to get a say in what goes on, how to take forward. There's a couple of questions I would like to ask on this though. First, it's going to go to consultation. Will the consultation be finished by the time it comes back to committee for November to make the Trust's business case? Also, oh sorry.
And we'll do them one at a time. Right. Chief Executive, do you want to answer that? Okay.
Sorry, I'll do that.
I think the process of consultation is an ongoing one. I think there is potential to do a lot of consultation between now and November. But to be honest, we're looking at about a 5-year programme. There's going to have to be ongoing consultation over a longer period than that. So I think we can do something significant and substantial in advance of November, and Maureen might want to say a bit more about that. But it's not that this is, November won't be the end of the process, either of consultation or in terms of plotting the future. But what we will have by November is the Trust, which is obliged to submit its business plan to the Council by the 15th, do as much work as possible to set out a clear set of investment proposals, income generation and savings, and consultation is a critical part of getting there.
Ms Campbell, do you want to maybe expand on what the Chief Executive is saying there? Okay, fine. Okay then, carry on.
Right, thank you. Right, but also, you are going to go out for consultation, but there must be plans there for the new BRC. Do you know where it's going to be built? Can you answer that for what you told us? Or
okay, Ms Campbell.
Well, I think as we've highlighted in the report, the opportunity for the replacement of Bowness Recreation Centre would be to use the existing school facilities. I think Councillor Patrick's flagged the capital constraints that this plan is being developed within, and therefore I think we'd be looking to use the existing sports facilities that sit within the school, and how you attach a facility into that same space. So the recreation centre, as you know, sits right next door. So we'd be looking to use that campus of the existing centre and the school to make a new facility in that space. Exactly where on the space, we don't have a plan.
So that's actually, you'll hear my voice then. I don't know what it is. I can hear my voice. Also, there's the social bar that's in the centre. There's a business within the recreation centre. There will be discussions held with both. They will be consulted and taken forward. Right, that's fine. So it is going to be a major consultation. before anything is actually taken forward and decided. Is that right? Okay, that's fine for the recreation centre just now. Okay, for the town hall, I do feel that it's going to be hard for anyone to take over the town hall. The staff within the town hall at present do a great job. It is getting let out more and more every weekend, just it seems to be about let out. I know there's lots of things going on during the week, but I still don't feel that anyone could come and take as big a place as that on, though, again, through consultation, we will find out if that's right or not. So that's how I would like it for going for consultation. The Friends of Kinneil, I've been in touch with several members of the Friends of Kinneil over the last few days. Now, the work that the Friends of Kinneil does down at the Kinneil estate, we have got to remember this is a World Heritage Site. It's not just a wee site, it's a World Heritage Site down here.
Sorry, could you...
Sorry. I would like to know, has there been discussions taking place with the Friends of Kinneil, or will this happen when it's due to the consultation period about taking forward? Because I do feel there's no way the volunteers for the Friends of Kinneil can take this forward on their own. It's too a big site, we need funding, whatever. I've actually got to hear what the Friends of Kinneil have actually done within the last year. Now, this is unbelievable for a group of volunteers to take forward, and I want to make sure in this consultation period, because I really feel this is the sticking point for me, is this one. The Friends of Kinneil, the consultation, they must be heavily involved with this. Their feelings must be taken in place with all this, with everybody, including councillors, when this comes back. If they're not happy with what's going on, we have got to take heed of this. Sorry, Dom. We have actually started with opening up the White Lady mountain bike trail next month. That's took 9.5 years to take forward to actually get the funding for this, and it's going to be in the Kinneil estate. That is going to bring more to the Kinneil estate. So I just don't understand, but consultation, I'm happy for consultation to go ahead as long as people are heard with that one. Is there another one? I'm not sorry. Right, that's fine. It's just to say that as long as consultation is taking place.
Thank you. Sorry. I mean, it's difficult because you can imagine that every councillor in here, when I saw that report, has got something in his area that he's concerned and perturbed about, and it would be giving people an opportunity to try. But I think the consultation side of it that you've just emphasised there, Deputy Provost, is so important. Now, I think it's Councillor Murtagh, then Councillor is it Councillor Murtagh, Councillor Bowes, and Councillor Murtagh and Councillor Monroe, and then Councillor Colley and Councillor Bowes.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, I had a 19-1. Oh. Just to let you know, you've not mentioned my name there. Okay, thanks, Provost. So, I agree, and Councillor Ritchie there has mentioned the word consultation many times, and she's right, it's extremely important that our communities are consulted with. I think it's obviously clear to everybody that there's a section 11 in the report entitled consultation, which talks about the importance of consultation with the communities and the groups which use the facilities, and is really designed to address those issues about talking about the impact on the communities that is mentioned in the Labour amendment. My concern, looking at the amendment here, is that it kind of misses the point of the points A to K in our administration's motion, which kind of look at detailing the approach that we'd like to take. When you talk about delaying further implementation of these proposals are about enabling a report and a direction of travel to be worked up so that we have full proposals as far as I can see. It's about actually enabling us as a council to do something and to say, let's not just keep kicking the can down the road and then dealing with a crisis at the last minute where, you know, you talk about saying we need more time and detail to look at reports and this has come very quickly. We're always in a position where we get reports that are very detailed in a short amount of time and we have to do that analysis. But giving officers an amount of time which is appropriate to go and work up detailed proposals with consulting with our communities that enables us to plan for the future long term is far preferable in my mind, certainly speaking for myself as an elected member, than receiving a report last minute or a few minutes before where you're in effectively a situation where you can make one decision or another, not based on facts, not based on proposals, and then we're rushed into a decision which isn't robust, and we go back to the year by year by year situation where our communities don't know what's coming next. And to me, this report has come forward. It's come from a working group. Maybe not every member of the working group is entirely agreed with it, as Councillor Coombs has alluded to, but it gives that opportunity for proper, robust identification. It gives opportunity for a direction which is talking about investment. I find it quite incredible to hear some of the negativity that's coming when we're talking about, yes, change, and change is difficult no matter what it comes in. People say, well, we've got what we have. We're not happy with what we have, but let's say if we change anything, it's going to be worse. Well, when it was said that how many jobs are the administration going to put at risk, I think the question is more, how many jobs and facilities are the Labour Party prepared to put at risk just for the sake of making cheap political points and kicking something down the road, than recognising the situation which we're all in, which is we need to provide vision and direction and give our officers in the trust the opportunity to actually provide plans where we can make informed decisions and informed choices, to make positive investment in our community and look at the portfolio and say what is appropriate for our district as a whole. I think it's quite clear that it's not one size fits all everywhere across the council. We don't operate our sport and leisure facilities in a one size fits all as it currently stands. In myself and Councillor Bowes' where we have Larbert High, we have the Trice Community Sports Hub, which operates on a very different basis perhaps than some of the other areas, and that's taken its time to evolve and is still evolving, but it's been a fantastic resource and operation, and seeing the way that the community have taken to that. And nobody would ever say that it's not a DIY, well, do you know what, we don't want to do it and therefore let's just hand it over to the community. If they can't do it, then nobody will drop the ball. Absolutely. But I think what's important in understanding that consultation is critical, and case by case enables us to actually be able to have meaningful dialogue with our community, not just this is what might happen, do you like it? No, well, we can't do it. Meaningful dialogue about proper proposals, and understanding that community empowerment is a positive thing. We've seen some of the wonderful examples of positive contributions that our communities have made, because when you go out and you give the opportunity for community involved, like with the flower beds all across our district and the wonderful work that's going on there, it can be fantastic, and we need to actually go with meaningful proposals to those communities to see what is possible and work forward together, rather than just being negative and saying too difficult for us, let's not make a decision.
Thank you for your input. There is a number of councillors want to speak, and I can imagine that everybody would like to speak on this issue because it's so important. Councillor Bowes, we're going to you. But before we go to you, we'll bring in Councillor Coombs in relation to what she was saying. What was it you'd said? You'll get...
Thanks, Provost. Councillor Alexander said that I had got the wrong end of the stick. Perhaps he's referring to the stick that really matters here, and it's the stick that the Scottish Government has been using to hammer all local authorities. He mentioned resources, but, well, there was two things that he mentioned about me. Said that we need resources to invest. I think he should speak to his colleagues in Holyrood. And yes, the community asset transfer was indeed Labour proposals, and it was proposed because for the last 10 years there's been £150 million cut from Falkirk Council budgets. And the reason we're talking about cuts to the Trust today is because the 5 million in cuts to their budget comes from the 76 million in cuts from the Scottish Government, because I'm proving that I did not pick up the wrong end of the stick.
Thank you for that.
The stick is coming from Holyrood.
Thank you. Councillor Bowes, you've got an opportunity at last.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. It has taken some time. Okay, a couple of items on this. In the report, with this report is not the business case. I hear a lot of conversations going through today as if it is the business case. The business case comes in November. This is a framework to give some guidance which will form the business case, which we as councillors will decide in November. On that, and when you talk about, because it was brought up earlier on about how much it will be, it would be £3 million over the 5-year period. The break-even figure, and as long as everybody ties in with the business case at a later point to come up, that would be about 3 years into a 5-year period. The trust will actually have been reduced in subsidy by 3 million. So we'll actually be on break-even. When you get to the end of it, you're saving 5.3 million for every year thereafter in the future. So we're actually looking then at the future of this council. For far too long, there hasn't been action taken on this by whoever. It just hasn't been taken on the conditions of the buildings. And as somebody once said to me, we are where we are today, and we need to do something about it. Sitting on our hands again, I don't think is a reasonable, responsible way to go forward. I think we need to actually try to bring something back to this council that is going to be a reasonable approach for us going forward. The consultation has been mentioned, and my ward partner has already mentioned it. It's actually in the report, 11.1's got a section on there. I think there's also been assurances given by Maureen to Anne's questions as well on that. I think that's relatively important. Can I just declare that I have an interest in what I'm going to say just now, because I'm a director of the Adobe Hall Trust, but Adobe Hall was mentioned earlier on, and how the trust should do things as Adobe Hall. Well, Adobe Hall Trust are not run by Falkirk Community Trust. They've taken over the internal workings of that, and there's about 10 people, or there was 10 people up to about a month ago. I think it's three people have now left, so 7 people run the Adobe Hall Trust, and I thank the compliment that they have done well in their time, but it shows you that a small number of people can actually run a facility that, but we're doing it as a management thing rather than anything else. The council still control on the external, but yes, they are involved. So yes, going out to communities and talk to them, because I think that's particularly what the report talks about is management, and maybe even using the Adobe Hall Trust as a plan, as an example of what can be done would not be a bad thing, and it may actually give some people some comfort that this actually can be done. So basically, this to me is overdue. It's a sensible approach, but we're not actually making the decisions today. That's the key. What we're actually doing is putting a framework. People really need to understand that that's what this is. The decisions will be made, the financial decisions will be made when the trust put forward their business case, which will be in November. The consultation from now to November, as we have been assured, will be extensive, but it will be ongoing because it's part of the whole 5-year thing. I don't really see where kicking it into touch and doing nothing again, which unfortunately too many times we have done, is going to actually help the people of Falkirk in this council.
Just basically that Mrs. Coombs, I think, has
Councillor Coombs.
Apologies. Councillor Coombs has the wrong end of the stick on the grounds that she has omitted the single biggest increase in pre-education expenditure, we're seeing £70 million additional money.
Okay, Councillor Alexander, that's just a
housing.
repetition. Would you take would you take a seat?
Was
Thank you.
correcting a figure that was wrongly put.
Thank you very much. Okay then, Councillor Munro at last. I know you've been waiting, but there are other councillors now in the line behind you. It's an important issue and we want everybody to get their say. So Councillor Munro, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. The Trust was set up some 6 years ago with the clear ambition of reducing the financial burden on the Council by running facilities in a more innovative and commercial way, taking ideas from the private sector and reducing the VAT cost of buildings to the Council. Some good progress has been made over the 6 years to reduce the subsidy provided by the Council, which is currently £11 million. However, there has been some disconnect between the goals of the Council and the Trust. The working group was set up to prioritise a more collaborative working relationship. However, this document has emerged from the Strategic Property Review, which was an officer-only meeting, and the Medium-Term Business Planning Group, which is another officer group. So for many councillors, this is the first time they've seen this document, which is encompassing a very large number of big ideas and doesn't make easy reading. The Trust have been asked to make a saving of £5 million. In return, they're requesting an investment of 30 to 50 million to invest in properties. Which properties? I question whether this is a saving at all. If this capital investment is required to ensure that the Trust savings targets are met through investments in the income generating areas of its business, we also need to ensure that it's not just generating income, but balancing its books. If we're aiming to make substantial savings, it's important that the Trust is rigorous in its management of its facilities and its spending choices. However, there is a lack of clear financial clarity around the Trust proposals and no specifics for what is a very far-reaching report. But we need evidence of fiscal prudence because the Community Trust have not met their budget proposals or targets in recent years. We're talking of community campuses based around schools but with no costings, disposal of underutilised properties, but we're not sure which. Much more scope for joint working on the health and well-being agenda with local authorities, with other local authorities receiving large sums for such work. We have an opportunity to make much more of our tourism footfall, but no strategic plan. Our libraries are in some cases new and making a difference in their communities, and this could be replicated elsewhere, but it needs a more commercial mindset. As a council, we are supposedly on a journey to be being more inclusive, taking ideas from the front line, listening to our communities and their needs.
Final minute, sorry.
Yet this report has so far been none of these things. All of us serve our communities, and it's their money, and our job is to use it wisely and prioritise those things they need, not what someone thinks is best for them. We have to engage and we have to be open to the ideas of others.
Okay, thank you very much for your input. Councillor McCluckie, I know your light's been on for a long while.
Thanks, Provost, and I appreciate you recognise that, seeing it was the second light on. However, you're an exalted company because the previous Provost never used to notice my light either. So that's that. This is a very important thing. As I stated earlier on, I'm going to be going on the board of the Trust. However, I've never seen any of their previous minutes, or I've never heard any of their visions or anything. So until I seen these papers the other day, I knew nothing about what was happening. Also, being an independent, I've not got anybody on the working group, so I've not had any feedback on any of this. And like I say, it's only what I see here today. So when I see this today, I felt embarrassed. I've been shouting about Pier Upper Braes for 12 years, and I'm thinking to myself, when I read this today, I could be worse, I could have been in Bowness, because when I see this, I wouldn't like to be living down in Bowness when I see that. I heard thunder the other day. Well, I thought it was thunder, but it's possibly two ex-councillors down there who are just rumbling in their grave because if somebody's told them what was planned for down there. Now, a great big list here, I appreciate one change. However, some of the things here, obviously, Deputy Provost made a good case for turning and saying, obviously, Friends of Kinneil. There's other places on this. There's obviously Friends of Muirhavenside in my own ward. It's only a bit of the trust that operates in my ward. The excellent word. They got, of course, parking charges put on them last year against their wish to, after all the money they raised up there. But they're the same. No way can they take anything on. Obviously, the museum, Bonnett's Town Hall, Grangemouth Town Hall, Zetland Park, none of these groups can go and do it. Now, when I was saying to somebody during the interval there, what was said was, oh, if the community groups can't take these on, then the trust will just maintain them in the future. Now, I would like that clarified, if Maureen could clarify that, please, that if all the groups turn around and tell you where to go, because there's no way in hell that they can manage that are you going to continue to manage them? Because obviously you're looking at a savings in a budget, and I would like to know what is the cost for all these savings, and if none of these go ahead, can you tell us what your plan B is? Because you're saying you're coming back with a business plan in November, so I would like to see, well, if these don't go ahead, what is the other options that you are considering to save these millions of pounds? And is the opposition going to go and support these things as well? But as I say, I'm really concerned. Obviously, we say that libraries, mentioned in the past, we've already lost a mobile library. There used to be a wee van that went round all the wee communities and houses in the middle of nowhere and that. They've already lost that. But as I say, I would like to ken, if you would, Provost, give us information on the cost of all these savings that is hoped for, and as I say, if it didn't go, other concerns, Hall Glen. I've got a lot of family up in Hall Glen. What we're getting told here is we're going to lose the sports centre, but don't worry about it. You've got this Ettrick Docket Hall. It's like me, it's like us adjourning the meeting here and saying we're going to hear a meeting in the phone box out there, because that's the difference in these two facilities. We're going to be meeting.
Like to respond to some of the, Andy, like to respond to Ms Campbell? Thank you very much.
I think the question around what's the alternative is set out in 13.2 in the report. So if the Trust has been asked to identify how to take 50% out of its public subsidy that it receives from the council, so we get, as you say, just over £10 million a year. We've been asked to find £5.3 million. A lot of every single facility we run requires a level of public subsidy. So the question for us is, how do you reduce the public subsidy in order to meet the council's request in terms of the level of savings that are required? I think I totally understand all the concerns that are being expressed by elected members today, but the investment proposition, which was the point that I think Councillor Murtagh was pointing, and also to Councillor Bowes was pointing to, part of the investment proposition that's being made here is in order to maintain current provision in the future. So we're looking to make facilities operate as they, in a new way, in a better way, but with zero public subsidy. If we don't have the investment proposition, then clearly we can't do that, and that therefore means you need to reduce the number of things that you've got. You either get the cost down and income up, or you don't have the facility at all. So I think if we don't get an investment proposition approved by elected members, then we will have a shutdown plan, and that isn't something that I want. That's very much where we're coming from, is to say this is a very positive opportunity to look at how we move forward. On the point around the community engagement and the identifying of how people can be more involved, we've got tremendous community input to many of our facilities at the moment. And I think the question is, how do you move that forward? How do you get more engagement, more participation, more involvement? And we've got some really good examples where people are able to help us to manage things. And I would flag the Friends of Kinneil as a particularly strong example of that, where they do a tremendous amount of work that just wouldn't happen if they didn't do it. and they do it really well, and they do it to a very high standard. And I think that is something that we'd want to encourage more groups to do. I like the idea of the example given from Councillor Bowes about the Dobie Hall Trust. So we think Bowness Town Hall is too hard, but actually it's not dissimilar to the Dobie Hall, so maybe there is something to learn there. So we're not suggesting that these facilities have to survive entirely on their own. What we're suggesting is we should manage them in a slightly different way to we do at present, and seek to engage the community to have a stronger say and a stronger role in taking it forward. But the other side of that coin is that we would need to, if we don't manage to get that management option coming through, then we need to think about something else. And it is, as Kenneth, the Chief Executive, has said, it is a 5-year plan that we're working to. We don't expect all of this to happen overnight, and therefore if people know what they're working towards, it gives some time for people to think about it.
So Provost, the answer is that if the groups didn't take them out, it may be, unlike what was one of the members thought earlier on, that the Bowness Town Hall and Grangemouth Town Hall could end up shutting, even if they didn't take them on, or other premises. That's what has been stated here. The other issue is, why is that other big thing we're paying the money down there, the Helix, no on the list? Because that's another big park. We could save money. Some of the British Waterways would take that.
Thank you for your input. Now, there's a lot of councillors been waiting for some time, and we're going to Councillor Colley now. Then it's going to be Councillor Black, Councillor Blackwood. We've got Councillor Grant as well. We'll get Councillor Coleman in. So, Councillor Colley, it's your turn. Thank you very much.
I'm going to keep this very short. Well, one, I agree completely with everybody around consultation, and I think that the report is very clear that consultation is part of it. But I actually think, as Councillor Murtagh was saying, that actually we need to co-produce solutions with our communities, and that is something that is very integral to the health and social care agenda, and I believe part of the work that the IGB will do with the community trust, but actually what do we have and how do we use that to make the health and well-being of the people that we serve better. But I had a general question. It's a question for, I suppose, for the Chief Executive. It's really about process. The paper has come forward and there's been comments about not having enough detail in relation to finance, for example. So I think it might be helpful for the Chief Executive to talk through what this means. What would the process be in relation to for councillors having that level of detail? Because obviously we're making no decisions just now about the actual facilities themselves. Absolutely no decisions. All we're saying at the moment is go away and do some work. That's as far as I understand it. We're saying go away and do some work on this. But I just would like a bit of feedback from the Chief Executive, if that's possible.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, the process we go through every year is that the Trust submits a business plan, and the date required whereby that business plan is submitted is the 15th of November. So the purpose of this report is, I mean, it's really twofold. One is that the Council asked for a report back by June, an update on the position reached, so this report fulfills that requirement. But more importantly, it's this issue about creating a direction of travel for the proposals that will come forward so that the business plan can be rooted in that. So what this report is saying is there's an option here, a lot of work to be done, but it involves a combination of council investment so that the trust can generate income, plus community transfer where that is possible, plus working with others such as the IJB to deal with the financial gap, plus we feel probably a number of savings and closures. That's the range of it. But I suppose the issue is if we do not have a direction of travel that says actually you can look across that range of issues and come up with proposals in that context, I think the risk is, and Maureen touched on this, the risk is that we're back to the kind of annual situation we've faced, whereby proposals have come forward about closures because that is an obvious way to save money, and councillors very understandably don't like that and react against it, so we don't make that kind of progress. So really the purpose of this report, and why I specifically talk about direction of travel, is just to try and create an understanding of the type of options there are for the Trust if it's going to meet the challenge that this council has set it in terms of savings, and whether we can then use that direction of travel to create something which is longer term, which looks at the 5-year period and isn't just about short-term cuts to balance the budget, but is actually about a longer-term approach, including investment, community transfer, and other partnerships which might help get a more positive and a better solution to the budget challenges that are faced.
Thank you. A number of councillors still to speak, and we're going to Councillor Black now, followed by Councillor Blackwood, then Councillor Grant, Councillor Coleman, Councillor Garner. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Provost. And I think it is really important that we don't forget why the Trust was established. It was established to save over £1 million a year in VAT, and that, I think, is probably maybe around 8 million, and that money has prevented us from having to make cuts in other areas. And Maureen and our staff, I'd like to thank them because they've done a very good job in difficult circumstances. The motion does not mention at all in any way wider community consultation. It might be mentioned in the report, but it's not mentioned in the motion. And this report looks at taking a fundamental change in direction of travel for sport, culture and leisure, and the public should have their say. It's really important that they do. Provost, when people are struggling financially, they need to have opportunities for sport and leisure near them. As let's face it, they can't afford public transport to go 5 or 6 miles away, and their family may not have access to a car or public transport. When Labour was in power, it was always important to us that children, families, etc. had access to those facilities, and they didn't have to go far to use them. Cutting the Trust's budget from 11 million to 6 million does make life very difficult for them, and it makes it difficult for the communities that the Trust serves. Those communities need hope, and they need to feel valued. Talking about taking away the resources, and especially in some areas where there are several facilities mentioned, doesn't help morale. Bo'ness already feels cut off from the rest of the area. It's a town with a lot of heart and good volunteers. But if you look around us, most of the volunteers, and I don't mean in this room, so I'm not being cheeky to anybody, but if you look at the volunteers, we all know that most volunteers are of a certain age because for lots of reasons, pressure work, family commitments and having to work longer hours, etc., younger people are not able to volunteer. This year we asked community groups to plant flower beds. Next year we're going to ask them to plant the flowers too and grow them. I can understand that some towns and other areas have quite a lot of wealth and businesses can afford to subsidise these things. However, I can tell you that in this area there are not many small businesses who could afford to do that. We are asking the community to take over some of the Trust buildings, and I think that we're kidding ourselves on. People can only do so much, and those that can volunteer are already putting lots of hours in, and we can't expect them to do it all. We really need to wait and see what our communities tell us. We need to ask them what their priorities are. We need to value their opinions, and we need to respond accordingly. Around about 12 years ago, the SNP administration tried to close Kinneil Museum, and they had a fight in their hands, and they lost that fight. And over the last 10 years, that estate has come on leaps and bounds. Those volunteers need to be supported. They don't need to be left discouraged and worried. With regards to Grangemouth Town Hall and the Zetland Park, yet again, we're not thinking strategically. We're talking about making Grangemouth Town Centre a conservation area in one report, and we're all working together to get heritage lottery funding for Zetland Park. We all need to be in the same hymn sheet with that and be working towards the same aims. Yes, there's a place for volunteers, but we need to ensure that our prospective funders don't think we're running on a wing and a prayer. Provost, I'm happy to support this amendment. Our communities need to have their say, and we need to take a lead from them as to what their priorities are. Thank you, Provost.
Provost 19.1. Councillor has been slightly misled. The reference was made to 12 years ago. The SNP did not try to close. SNP did not try to close Kinneil House. We gave the option of Kinneil House or the cinema, which we brought back into being. We
I never
said
mentioned-
we would stand by. We said we'd stand by the views of the people of Bowness.
Provost,
and we
Mr
did.
Moody
Hold on,
possibly
hold
clarify
on,
whether this
hold
was a
on.
19-1
Councillor
or not.
Alexander, Councillor Alexander, come on. Right, I thought we were going by all that situations, but the fact of the matter is you get an opportunity for a 19-1 to come up and clarify exactly what information was wrong. You just stand up and do it. We don't carry on with other issues. Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, Councillor Coombs was right. Point H on the motion from the administration, the removal of Denny Sports Centre from potential closure. I certainly welcome that, no doubt about it. And then I start to wonder, if it's as easy as that, why is it in the paper earmarked for the closure in the first place? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Blackwood's just taken away part of my speech here. I'm going to ask Councillor Meiklejohn about the motion here, because they proposed the motion, obviously want their support. And everything's been mentioned all day about consultation. You mentioned, Provost, that every councillor in this room would like a voice about their community, Bonnybridge Library, for example. But if it goes to consultation, then we'll have a chance to speak. I am confused once again on this motion. Everything goes to consultation, but remove Denny Sports Centre from potential closure proposals. It's the only one that sticks out. And I'd like to ask why. Is it anything to do because we've got a deputy leader of the council sits here or what?
Happy to answer that question, Provost.
Yes, my direct question, why that's there.
Happy to answer that. As I indicated during the speech, Councillor Grant, that this was the first that Denny Sports Centre had been put into a category for potential closure. That was not something we were aware of. And in order to be able to make any informed decisions, we would need to have details around the condition, the usage, etc. And we're not in a position to make decisions around transferring anything to a potential closure. Can I just say, Provost, this was a Chief Exec's report. It wasn't an administration report. And therefore, that is why there may well be differences between our view and what's in the report.
I think Mr Moody actually clarified that same position. Councillor Garner, then Councillor Coleman.
19.1. I would like an apology for Councillor Grant, and in fairness that Denny Centre has been removed from this just because I'm Deputy Leader of the Council. What a shocking statement to make.
Thank you. Okay then, we're moving forward.
Am I getting the apology?
Yeah. Well, it's up to Councillor Grant if he wants to apologise, if he thinks there's apology necessary.
I'll stand up, Provost. And we're all entitled to our opinion, it's my opinion.
Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but as long as we treat everybody with respect, and we're trying to bring that into this chamber. Okay, Councillor Coleman, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost. Not being involved in the history of the Trust, or indeed really inclined to blame the global financial crisis on any political party, I'm just going to keep my comments to the report and the motion. As I read it, the Chief Executive's report is a report of two halves. It's a report about investment, and that's an investment in capital. An investment which I believe from my reading of the report is intended to, over the long term, increase revenue, increase footfall, and ultimately reduce the public subsidy. And then there's the second part of the report, which gives specific examples, particularly section 9. I think all of the councillors in this chamber are concerned about these examples, and which is why I'll draw members' attention to section K of the motion, which specifically notes that decisions will not be made, sorry, I'll read it properly, you can read it yourselves. Notes no decisions will be made until full business case is presented to council for members to agree. So effectively what that's saying is, all of the concerns, all of the specific examples, all of which properties to be invested, what's happening in Bowness, Bonnybridge Library, Slamanan Library, all of the issues with Denny will be looked at when the Trust provides a business case. And as it's a quasi-business, it can only provide an accurate business case when it has an accurate number on what it's going to spend, which is about the investment. So I feel that a failure to agree the report, a failure to agree the motion is beyond the political toing and throwing. It's a failure to agree 30 to 50 million pounds worth of investment in the trust, and I'll reiterate that that's capital investment with the intention of reducing the public subsidy over the long term. And while I think we're all agreed that we all in this room have concerns over individual facilities, and indeed I share concerns over public consultation, if we don't agree with the report, if we put this to the long grass, if we set a slightly odd timescale of September for something else coming forward, then we're in the position that we are, that there is a cut of £5 million over 5 years to the Trust's budget with no potential to grow their business. And this report, this motion, invests in the Trust so they can grow their business, and Section K gives reassurance to all of the things that have been said there. So I would suggest that everything can be looked at in the future via Section K. Everything that's been raised by the Labour Group and the Conservatives is dealt with in this motion, and I suggest that you agree it.
Your input, Councillor Reid, and then Councillor Binnie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Provost. I think it'd be very easy to make cheap. It'd be very easy to make cheap political points over this item, but I think all of us, excusing those that were elected at the last election, stand guilty of lack of investment over our respective administrations. They're all to blame for where we are at the moment. But as Councillor Bowes said, we are where we are. It's what we do next that's important. Reference has been made regularly to ostriches having their head in the sand, and that's not an option. To do nothing is not an option. My main concerns about the report is the reference to the capital programme. If we are to invest £30 to £50 million over 5 years, and we've already agreed a 5-year capital programme, where is the extra money coming from? Could I start off with that question, please?
Yes, thank you. I mean, in relation to the report itself, it does make it clear that we will need to take a detailed assessment of that and revisit the capital programme. I mean, this isn't, it's not a cost-free option. I suppose it's about that fairly fundamental question about whether there is an appetite to invest and improve the leisure estate. And if there is, then yes, the Council will need to deal with that in the context of the capital programme, and that will have a revenue implication. So yes, to be absolutely clear about that, it will require that review and that revisiting of the capital programme. That's set in the context of failing to invest in facilities and the deterioration and reduction in service that would flow from that.
Okay, so will that be a matter of consideration by the Council in November, change to the capital programme?
I mean, the capital programme will come forward to the Council on an annual basis, as it always does, and whatever proposals come forward from the Trust, if we take this route forward, will be incorporated within that.
Mr Smale has changed his figures about the 20 million capital. It would be roughly just over £1 million per annum. I just wondered if anything else in the capital programme would have to come out because of possible investment in what's been handed over to the Trust. Or is that a question that can't be answered at this stage?
Well, thank you, Professor. All I would say is that every year when we look at the capital programme, we take decisions about what would be in and what wouldn't be in, and any proposals from the Trust would simply have to be considered in that context.
Right, okay. There's a reference to Hall Glen, for example, which is now in my current ward. I know Councillor Binnie, I pay her tribute for the work she's been doing with the group up there. I met with them last Friday. It would be a change if what's in a kind of embryonic state were to be cut off at this point. So I take it those groups will be encouraged and helped, perhaps even financially in terms of administration, to accomplish the aim of possible community transfer. In other words, will there be money on the table for them?
I mean, the position is, in terms of any asset which the Council chooses to dispose of, then there is that, under the Community Empowerment Act, there is that that right in relation to community asset transfer. So that applies in relation to any and all of the facilities. In terms of the degree of support, that would have to be something that was considered in the context of overall resources.
I just think this particular group has the potential to become another Derby Hall Trust, from which I had to resign sadly because of work. But Councillor Bowes has filled the vacancy more than adequately. Picking up Councillor Colley's point about the process, there seems to me to be an absence of people in the process, especially if I can continue the alliteration, the poor people, people in poverty. To take away a facility such as Hall Glen from that community would affect the poorer people, I think, indiscriminately. So will all these things be contained in... The motion refers to clubs and societies, but I'm thinking more of the wider population being consulted. So will it be a full community consultation? And how do we get to those people who are poorest?
Thank you, Provost. Excuse me. I mean, there is the broader need for consultation, and that's explicitly set out in the report. And I think in any community, and this has already been very clearly demonstrated by members' contributions, both at the working group and here at councils, people are very concerned about what happens in their community. And that's entirely understandable. We need to work with communities in order to work through that with them. But it doesn't take us away from the fundamental position that is faced. It's about finding a route whereby we can move from where we are now to a reduction of 50% in the subsidy in 5 years' time. And there's a lot of potential issues in relation to doing that. We talked about income generation, we've talked about transfer, and we've talked about closure of facilities. And it will be, if we meet that target, a combination of these things. And there does need to be consultation associated with all of that. But I suppose also and it doesn't surprise me, but I can see the risk that if we go into that process with a whole list of things that we cannot do, then what that really means is we won't find the solution which the council has set through its medium-term financial plan.
So we have to take our wallet to those meetings as well. We have to take our wallet to those meetings as well, I would suggest. Just a final point, there's been some criticism of the trust. They appear to be the kind of bogeyman, well, perhaps the BPC, the bogey person in these issues. Those facilities are council facilities. The trust only leases them. So to point the finger at the trust as if they were guilty of neglect is somewhat exaggerated. And I think people have to stand back and ask what would have happened had these facilities still been in council ownership. The position would have been exactly the same. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you for that, sir. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Provost. And first of all, I'd like to ask a question direct to the Chief Executive here. Would the Chief Executive confirm that Bowness Recreation Centre will in fact remain until such time funding is in place and a plan in place to go ahead with the new fit-for-purpose facility? I'm asking that because there has been, in my opinion, incorrect reporting in a local newspaper just recently of this.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, there is no proposal in this report to close Bowness Recreation Centre. What there is at paragraph 6.5 is a recognition of a need for early investment because of the potential loss of risks associated with the existing building. But there is no proposal to close that in advance of investment.
Thank you. It's easy to sit in opposition and continue to kick things into long grass and to kick hard decisions into long grass. We have to look. We know that council budgets are under severe pressure, more so than ever before, and we can argue about that where the blame lies. We can also argue about the lack of investment in 10 years of Labour administration into the facilities, which Councillor Reid was alluding to there quite a bit, I think. I think 10 years is a long time for buildings to not be. Yeah, but 10 years is a long time, Pat. Yeah, the very same Labour who stand here, as I say, after 10 years and literally no investment, letting them deteriorate into the state that they're in just now. This report and the motion are looking to address this, the damage done to our communities by that administration, in my opinion. As Councillor Grant alluded to, you allowed your opinions in the short, medium and long term through investment. The people aren't stupid. They see it, they realise what's going on here, and they realise this is just kicked into long grass. This isn't good for the communities, this isn't good for the employees, and it's just a delay tactic, in my opinion. If you look at the papers, which I'm sure we all have read from start to finish, there is a big part in there about consultation, and I think Councillor Patrick maybe missed that. I don't know when his opening remark before the debate. I don't know if the debate's maybe made him look at that again. Hopefully it has. If we talk about Councillor Grant as well, and his accusation about the Denny Centre. The Denny Centre, as Councillor Meikle-John was highlighted for the reasons she gave quite eloquently. And I believe, and I know my colleague, Councillor Colleague, believes that's the right decision to make on that particular facility. I'm not sure where Councillor Harris stands on this, but I'm sure he's looked into it a bit of depth as well. So hopefully people are looking at this in a bit of depth, and they're looking at what this motion actually does do, and the amendment to me is just another delay tactic, as I say. Thank you, Provost.
And as you said, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Councillor Binney, thank you. Sorry you've been a long time waiting, but it's so important that everybody gets an opportunity.
I mean, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, and I'm not going to talk for an awful lot of time. We're all here. We want to do the best for our communities. Right. We want to do what's best for our communities, and that's why I think our motion is best. I mean, I understand the Trust's business. They're running a business. They've got to do the best for their trust, their charity, for their community, and they need a direction of travel. So this is why this collaborative proposals have come through. But I would like to say, I'm not going to go through every part of the motion, but I'm going to talk about why I think our motion is the best motion, because it's important, it's true, we must engage with our clubs, groups that are interested in increasing their role in managing the assets, including Denny Football Centre and Hall Glen Sports. Now that's very, very important. But we must do it, and it must be real. The consultation must be real. It's not just words, it's actually face-to-face speaking to our communities, finding out what they want. Is it indeed feasible for them to go ahead? They might make that decision themselves. Is it feasible? It might not be feasible for them, because you've got to look at the background. These people in the community are part-time, they're volunteers, they're not experts, they don't know the world of support is out there. And I think we should be supporting these people in the community, but they need the resource probably to do that. But I think our motion in here, our party, supports all that. It lets the trusts move forward, and it lets our communities move forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I've been somewhat disappointed in a number of members in this chamber across the other side, in that not being able to see what the motion actually does and the positives that it actually brings, not just to their individual wards, but for the whole of Falkirk district by way of investment. I think that kicking this into touch and the melee that comes forward as the amendment actually just hampers the Trust and indeed the Chief Executive in actually being able to do the work that is needed to be brought forward. As my colleagues have already said, the timescales are unrealistic, totally unrealistic to bring forward a 5-year plan and business plan, because that's essentially what you're doing. as you're saying, we want more information. Yes, we all want more information. The motion actually gives quite clear, detailed direction about what we want the Chief Executive and the Trust to do in getting that information that people so desperately want to know about the financial plans. It will then be up to members to make that decision. They may well say, no, we don't want to do that, and that is fine. We've done that before, but at least we will have done it in a considered way and indeed consulted with communities. And yes, there is a whole section, and I apologise if I did not make that explicit. I thought that was inherent, and I thought people would have understood just how important consultation with our communities, not just our clubs, societies, was going to be. Because as we've seen in many other cases, some very good cases, such as the Friends of Zetland Park, the ability to be able to consult with these communities enables money to be levered in, money that elsewhere can't be sought, that can actually make a difference in the communities. And my colleague, Councillor Colley, was absolutely spot on about doing things in co-production. But we need to give them the opportunity. We need to go out and ask them first. And what this amendment starts to do is to close down those opportunities to actually go out and ask them, because we're not going to do anything. And that's essentially what it's going to be. Ultimately, by the time a report comes back, people are not going to like it. They're going to throw it out, and we're going to go back into the single one-year cycle where the trusts are continually thwarted in what they want to be able to do in order to get to that point where they're reducing their income, increasing their income, but reducing the public subsidy. So I'm really disappointed that folks can't see that, and what's more, they're not seeing the opportunities within their own community to improve health, leisure facilities, because lack of investment. And I take Councillor Reid's point. It has been over a sustained time, but the Labour group were the lead administration for 10 years and could have grasped this at the point when they moved across to the Trust and done something about it. As I said, that we need to take ownership, we need to take things head on, we need to actually give our communities something to work towards. And that's the vision and the ambition. The vision and the ambition that has been just thrown out today by particularly the Labour amendment, which leaves me extremely disappointed and disheartened after the amount of work that has gone on, certainly by my members, and actually working with communities to actually get that community participation process going. So we're not going to give any clear direction. We're going to ask for the report back in September. We've only got a few weeks in order to do that. Realistically, all the financial information is not going to be available then. And that's something that I think people need to reflect on and accept, that what you're asking for is not actually achievable. And that's why the motion is far clearer and gives that additional time for the work to get done. We're not going to have all the answers because it is a 5-year plan. And what's in year 1 and 2 is going to be clearer than what's in year 3, 4 and 5. We know that already, but that's obviously not going to be acknowledged or accepted. And the investment programme looks to maintain facilities right across the district, not in any one place but right across the district, and that is something that again is not being acknowledged, and I'm sure as we go forward, that as the social media starts going, that people will start to realise exactly who is actually fighting for their communities and who is sitting back and saying this is too hard, so let's not address it, let's just tuck it under the carpet yet again. So Provost, I think the motion is far clearer, far more concise, and gives a very clear direction, and it gives the timescales in order for the work to get done. I think the amendment is very unrealistic and unachievable, and it will fail when it actually comes, because they will realise that the information is just not going to be robust enough at that time. Thank you.
Before we go to the vote, just like to thank members. As I said at the beginning, this is a really, really important situation for all our communities, and everybody most people took advantage to bring their concerns. So we're just going to go to the vote now. Does anybody need any clarity about what we have here? Do you want the motion read out and the amendment read out? Are you quite happy just to go to the vote? Or Councillor Spears?
Apologies, I had an urgent hospital appointment to attend to, but I think I've been here for quite a bit of the debate, and trust me, I know.
Well, I'm sorry, Councillor Spears, but we've wound up. We've wound up.
Just to see if I can vote or not.
Well, that's just a clarity.
Thank
Perfect. Is okay? Right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Provost, the motion is moved by Councillor Meiklejohn. It's seconded by Councillor Garner. The amendment is moved by Councillor Bissett. It's seconded by Councillor Nimmo. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Motion.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 12 votes for the motion. There are 14 votes for the amendment, and the amendment is carried.
Okay, but we're past the 3-hour mark, and item 7 that we still got to go back to could take quite some considerable time. So with everybody's agreement, I intend to take 10 and 11 just now, and then we break for lunch. Has everybody agreed to that? So item 10 is delegation of powers to determine urgent issues during the summer recess. Pages 356 to 359. Have we agreed to that? Agreed. Thank you. Item 11 is the execution of deeds. Pages 360 to 363. Have we agreed to that? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, then we'll come back at quarter past 1. Thank you, members. We're going to reconvene, and as stated at the beginning, we'll go back now to item 7, which is the Falkirk Local Development Plan 2, submission to Scottish Ministers and summary of unresolved issues. It's pages 33 to 336, and the report is by the Director of Development Services. But before she comes in with a report, could I just say on my own behalf, and that I would like to thank Alistair Shaw, who's here today to answer any questions, and the team that have been working tirelessly over a long period of time to bring this to committee today. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And I'd like to add my thanks to yours and to other members in relation to that. Alistair, as we mentioned, is here today, as is Catherine Devlin, who's another member of the team, but there are others who aren't here, so I'll make sure that your thanks are passed on to them. As the Provost said, we're here today to consider the next stage of the Local Development Plan 2 proposals. We're just remembering that it was the Chief Executive's first meeting of the Council when we discussed the draft of the plan, and this is the next stage of the process when the consultation period has concluded, and we're offering you today a plan for submission to Scottish Ministers to move into the examination stage, which was previously an inquiry stage, is now known as an examination. You'll remember that our LDP, which has now become LDP1, was adopted in 2015, and we have a requirement to review and adopt a new plan every 5 years, which is an enormous undertaking for any authority, but it's one that the thrust behind this requirement is to make sure that our local development plan framework, against which, as you know, all planning applications must be assessed, is up to date and relevant. The plan before you today describes the vision and general objectives for it and our spatial planning arrangements for the next 20 years, and it has detailed arrangements and proposals for the next 10, and obviously these are revisited, as I've mentioned, on a 5-yearly rolling basis. The nature of this work is such that there is always extensive consultation at every stage of this process, and this stage is probably the one that's attracted the most formal feedback that we have had. The plan was available for consultation for a period of 8 weeks after it was approved by members last year, and the outcome of that consultation period is summarised in paragraph 4 of the report. So since the consultation period closed, Alistair and colleagues have been working away hard to assess the responses that we have had, to analyse these and to capture these in the documents that are before you today, together with the officers' views as to how these representations should be treated. So you have an Appendix 1 to the report, which is an overview of those matters that have been raised in the consultation responses, and you have an Appendix 2, which provides more detailed information together with the officer responses that I've referred to. Unsurprisingly, we've had an awful lot of representations that are housing related. They relate to both our general approach to housing land supply and obviously down to very specific matters relating to very specific sites. But that we have had responses on a number of different areas, and these are described in paragraph 4.3. So what are we asking you to do today? We are suggesting to you that you adopt and approve the plan that the officers are putting forward today in its current condition. If you were to not follow the recommendation and to take a different view, then we really have we're in a place where we have to distinguish between any adjustments which are very minor and what things that are known as notifiable modifications. And these are described in the report, but really these prompt a republication of the proposed change proposals, and you can understand why. If we've gone out to consultation and said this is what we're proposing to do, and then we take a view that we're actually going to do something else, and we haven't asked the public about that, then that's clearly something that we need to go back to, and that's something that's described in statute. However, I would refer you to paragraph 4.6 of the report, where there is specific guidance that comes from Scottish Government that says that we shouldn't really be engaging in notifiable modifications unless this is something that's absolutely necessary and it isn't expected as a matter of course. One of the other options that is available to us as part of the process is that we can say to the reporters who will carry out the examination, here's a representation that we have had. We're not going to change the plan, but we don't have a problem with it, and you decide when you get to see the report itself. And that's the approach that we have taken in terms of this, the return that we're suggesting that you make. We are on schedule. It's a very tight schedule, as you know, but we are on schedule for the plan to be adopted in July 2020, which isn't very far away, as I say, subject to no notifiable modifications requiring to be advertised. There are two other things that we need to talk about, we need to consider today. One is a document that we require to submit known as a summary of unresolved issues, and it's exactly what it says on the tin, and this is in a format that's described as a Schedule 4 format, and that's also included as part of Appendix 2 to the report. I've touched on the issue of going back to the reporter. We need to, once we conclude on these matters, we'll need to cross-reference things in all of these documents to make sure that everything is as it ought to be, and also there may be some very minor changes that are required simply if there's some factual inaccuracies that have crept in as a consequence of a passage of time. So perhaps if we're talking about 3 months or 4 months and it actually ends up being 6 months, that would be a change that we would make just as officers to make sure that there are no inaccuracies having crept in. The other thing is what's known as an action programme that was approved by members in August last year, along with your draft plan, and that's also been subject to consultation. There's some very small amendments made to that of a very technical nature, so that's before you today as well. Section 5 of the report makes reference to consultation, as I say, hugely important to communities, and therefore there's a great deal of consultation built in at every stage of the process. And what we've done since we last met is described in paragraph 5. We have undertaken an equality and poverty impact assessment as well, and there has been a strategic environmental assessment done on the plan. I'd like to just, before I finish up, mention that we have had a late submission. I don't know whether it's been circulated to members or not, in relation to a site at Whitecross. We've considered this carefully. It is a late submission. It doesn't fall to be considered as part of the process, but we have looked at it and we've taken a view that it doesn't make any difference to the views that we're expressing to members today. I have to stress that the process here is a rigorous process, and it's for a reason. It's to allow everyone fair access to make comments at appropriate times. So I just conclude, Provost, by referring members to the recommendations in paragraph 2 of the report, and that's to authorise the submission of the proposed LGP2 to Scottish ministers with a view to asking minister to appoint persons to examine the plan and to approve the summary of unresolved issues, which is just contained in Appendix 2. As I say, I have colleagues with me today, and we'll be happy to try and answer any questions that members have. Thank you.
I'm just going to move over to Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Provost. I was unaware, just starting off with the final point there, I was unaware of any late application for Whitecross, but happy to accept the recommendations from the Director. I'm not going to repeat myself, Provost, because we've had this particular report before us on a number of occasions as on a staged basis, and I think it's been dealt with very maturely by the whole Council. So I commend the whole Council for their attitude towards this process and for their actions, and to commend the document to the wider community. There's just one small amendment I'd like to make, and I'll ask for clarification from the Alistair in the interpretation of it. And it's a small amendment. You need to indulge me a wee bit, Provost, because it's on the computer version, and my eyesight, I'm afraid, is not good enough to read the small print off a relatively small screen. So I'm going to ask my colleague, Councillor Colley, to nurse me through this, if she can speak on my behalf in relation to that aspect of it.
There are two small amendments to LDP2 itself, suggested on page 44 of the original LDP. Sorry, I have a real problem with acronyms. On the full plan. Point 436 in infill development specifically notes, excuse me, I'm having to flip between documents, specifically notes in point 1 the scale, density, disposition and design of the proposed houses respect to townscape character of the area. I feel it's sorry, so apologies. So it's on page 45, HC06, the box itself, there are 6 number points. Point 1 refers specifically to respect the townscape character of the area. The addition is to add countryside character of the area, recognising that infill development should not be restricted solely to urban areas, but appropriately, and I emphasise appropriately, be considered within the countryside as well, particularly for some of our village limits where actually the land itself is in effect, was in effect brownfield site. The second amendment is on page 44, and that relates to HC05, and excuse me while I flick again between documents. Where are we? I'm just getting the right one. I've got, here we are. Bullet point 2, which reads, here we go. Restoration or replacement of houses which are still substantially intact, provided that the restored replacement house is of a comparable size to the original. The suggestion is that the word original is changed to suitable size and design. We do in putting forward those two amendments, except there is some pressure for new housing in the countryside, but there's very good reasons for countryside development not being overly restrictive, as is the current case, and encouraging sensible development and sensitive use of countryside development. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Convener. It's true what they say, the eyesight's the first to go. Can I ask Alistair to explain the thought behind that particular amendment, and also will this create any difficulties in terms of delays in relation to the submission to the Scottish Government?
Thank you, Provost. I think the two matters in question, I'll start with HT06, which is the first one that Councillor Colley referred to. That's a policy which is around, provides criteria for determining whether houses essentially in garden ground in the curtilage of properties are appropriate. There's some ambiguity about whether this policy refers just to the urban area or to the countryside. There was a representation on this from a company in the terms that have been expressed. I think our preference as officers was that we would clarify this policy so that it didn't refer to the countryside, because we have other policies that deal with the countryside and infill in the countryside, and it might create a bit of confusion. But in terms of whether it remains a fairly minor change to the policy, and certainly I wouldn't regard it as a notifiable modification, so it wouldn't trigger further consultation and delay to the plan. And I think likewise with the change to HC05, a relatively minor change, I think, which I don't think would constitute a notifiable amendment. So these would be, as the Director has explained, what we would do would be just to say that the Council, if the Council took this view, we would say that these are changes that the Council has no particular issue with, and it's up to the reporter if he wishes to make them.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm grateful to Alistair and to Fiona for the contribution with it. So with that, I would formally move the recommendations contained within, with those two minor areas of really increased flexibility in terms of the ability of the authority to interpret the applications accordingly. Thank you very much.
Formally second, Provost.
Okay, I think what I'm looking for at the moment is a wee bit more clarification, because the references made aren't contained in the agenda papers, they're contained in the LDP report, which when they go, I don't think members were looking for the page number there, so it would be beneficial if Mr Moody maybe just clarify the situation, and maybe we could get a readout of the first one, because when we're looking for papers, we couldn't attribute it to, because we hadn't the paper in front of us. So if you just bear with us for a minute.
Can I just note that they're referenced as minor issues, but not the full detail of the actual
but when
text,
you gave us the page number, everybody's looking for the page number at 44 and 45, and they're not contained within the agenda paper, but they're in the LDP Mr Moody, thank you, sir.
No, I think as Provost, just as you said, the references have been made so far to the content of LDP 2 itself, which doesn't form part, as you say, Provost, of the agenda papers. I think Mr Shaw has helpfully said to us, I think that both the changes made are in response to representations which have been made, which is an important aspect of the process. And I don't know, Alistair, if you're able to assist us by taking us to the reference to those in the papers that are in front of members, and that may just help to clarify matters.
It's page 264, I think it is in the report.
Okay, so this is under issue 19, which deals with other housing policies.
And it starts at page 258, 259, sorry, on your agenda.
So in terms of policy HCO6,
that's the top of page 261.
You can see there's a representation summarised there from Development and Environmental Services Limited, and that's the substance of the amendment that's proposed there. So if you continue over onto page 264, the officer's view on the reason not to make that change is explained there.
The bottom half of that page.
Members following this?
So that's the HCO6 change. In terms of the HCO5 change, if you look at page 260, at the bottom of that, it's encompassed within the last paragraph on page 260. Again, a representation from Development and Environmental Services Limited. And there are various changes sought there. But the one you can see there, change comparable size to the original to suitable size and design. So that's the reference there. And in terms of the Council's response to that, you'll find that the officer's response to that will be found on the bottom of page 263 and going over onto the top of page 264. And the specific explanation about that change is just at the end of that paragraph at the top of page 264.
I wonder, Mr Shaw, if you, and excuse us for maybe no full understanding, but I wonder if you could maybe just simplify what the amendments are in relation to the two areas that you've just covered. Just take it one by one. What exactly we're being asked to amend? Thank you.
Okay. The amendment to policy HCO6, basically it's a policy, as I say, that is concerned with the acceptability of additional houses within the curtilage of new houses within the curtilage of existing properties. And the policy has a range of criteria against which such proposals would be assessed. And the first criteria states that the scale, design, density, disposition and design of the proposed house respects the townscape character of the area. That's in the current proposed plan. So that's really just about, I suppose it's common sense about a new house in an infill site respecting what's around about it in terms of townscape. The change would respect the townscape and countryside character of the area. So effectively it's saying there could be situations where this could happen in the countryside and in a subdivision of a plot, in which case it's not really the townscape so much as the countryside, the character of the countryside that's at issue.
I think if I can just add to it, I think our position as officers is that this policy is not designed for countryside use, and that there are countryside policies which would prevail, and that was why we decided not to support the proposal as was put forward in the representation.
Yes, Provost, to adopt, I think, the usual process that we have done in relation to any change to the local development plan documents is, rather than encompassing everything in a great big single motion or amendment, where there is a change suggested, there's just a simple for or against vote in relation to each suggested change. Now, the first of them, as you say, Provost, is in relation to the suggested change to the Council's response to the representation on HC 06, and that is, as Mr Shaw and Mrs Geisler have laid out, not to amend the LDP to itself, but to amend the Council's response to that, to say to the reporter that the Council wouldn't have an issue with that change being made when it reaches the stage of examination. And I think I'm right in understanding that's the approach by Mrs Geisler in relation to any representations where a positive view has been taken to it. And that's set out in paragraphs 4.9 and 410 of Mrs Geisler's report. So that's the first change, and it's the change as suggested and read out by Councillor Colley, and I think seconded by Councillor Alexander.
Well, just a point of clarification. I know that members will be wondering, there's no been any amendment put up. Would there need to be amendment put up before it goes to any type of vote?
No, I think
no.
The proposal has been made by Councillor Alexander and Councillor Colley that this change be made, and I think it's a simple question of, is the Council in favour of it or not?
Yeah. Does somebody want further clarification over there?
No, I just wondered, Provost, if we're talking about these two sites and these two small amendments, I just wanted to speak about Grangemouth for a minute.
No, we're talking about these ones
That's
specifically.
fine. Okay, I'll come in later on.
Okay, that's fine. Are you going to come in with an amendment right to the LDP too? Right, okay, thank you. Okay then.
So I suppose the question is, is the Council agreed, Provost, to the change suggested in relation to HC 06?
Agreed.
Provost, and I think this is just purely in terms of clarity. I think it would be helpful if we could just hear again the change that's being suggested in relation to HC05, and that's in part because looking at the terms of the representation, which this is a response to, which is found on, I think, the bottom of page 260, is just to clarify that I think as we have noted, the amendment that's put, it doesn't quite encompass all of it, and that may perfectly well be a deliberate decision on the part of the mover.
Yes. The amendment the adjustment that I read out was to change in bullet 2 to change the word original after size to suitable size and design. so that it doesn't, it's about not necessarily the original, but what is suitable.
Just seeking a bit of clarity here.
Yeah.
We're going to have a 5-minute adjournment just to clarify the legal position with this, okay? There you are. Thank you very much. Want to make sure we get everything right. Thank you. Okay, members, we'll reconvene after that short delay just to seek legal clarification, which is going to be forthcoming in 1 minute's time.
Yes, thank you, Provost. That was helpful just to take the time out, I think, just to clarify the intention of the proposed change there. And it may be helpful for members to refer to page 260 of the papers, and this is the paragraph at the bottom of that, which represents a representation from Development and Environmental Services Limited in relation to the policy HC05, housing in the countryside. And the change that is being proposed here is essentially the first part of that, so only the change to subsection 2 within the policy, and that's changing comparable size to the original to suitable size and design. And the consequence of the Council being agreeable to that would be that the response which the Council makes to that representation will be to say that the Council doesn't have a difficulty with the representation and would be open to the reporter considering that in the context of the examination. Okay. And we have confirmation from Mr. Shaw that it's not a notifiable change.
Okay, everybody happy to agree to that? Agreed? Agreed, thank you very much. But Councillor Black, you wanted to come in the LDP too? Thank you.
Yes, I did, Provost. Thanks very much. Can I just say first that this agenda item is 336 pages long, and lots of cross-referencing in it, and to look at this on your iPad and make full justice of it is not easy at all. And my iPad's just, as I say, died on me just about an hour and a half ago. No, the battery, it just stopped working. So, as a Grangemouth councillor, over the last 11 years, I've repeatedly said that we need to look at new ways to deliver better, more modern, affordable housing and social housing in Grangemouth. And I've asked on several occasions over the years, I mean, the officers I'll remember that I've always asking, where can we find new sites in Grangemouth? You know, I do understand the restrictions with the river forth, the hazard zones and the motorway, but we're unlike every other area of the council. And again, of course, in this agenda and in the paperwork, we don't have any new sites coming to Grangemouth. No new mention of housing. The Community Council did mention Bus 13, a site at Glensborough, and if there's any chance at all that this could be utilised, then that chance should be taken, because Grangemouth desperately needs more housing. Currently, we have the Community Planning Partnership recognising that there is significant work to be done in terms of demolition and rebuilding, and this needs to be recognised. I don't know if maybe it could be recognised in the plan. This is all stuff that's been happening in the last few months. And I'd agree with the Community Council that it also seems to be about the industry. We have 17,000 people living in Grangemouth, and they don't seem to, it seems to be all about business and not about people. With regards to the flood prevention framework, there's been a lot of concern expressed on social media and to myself regarding the prospective felling of some of the trees in Zetland Park. Grangemouth is little green space, and last week at the executive it was mentioned that Grangemouth Town Centre would have a conservation area, and I welcomed that, and I've been asking for again several times over the years, that some of the buildings in around Charing Cross, the Town Hall, the cinema, municipal chambers, etc., they have their listed status improved. So, and if Falkirk can get heritage lottery funding for its town centre, then why not Grangemouth? So what I'm trying to say is that Grangemouth needs joined up thinking. It needs to make the best use of its assets and tourism opportunities, and that involves everyone working together, from flood defences to housing, from planning to parks. everyone needs to work together to help improve the lives of the people who are inconvenienced so much by all the industry that creates wealth for the rest of Scotland but leaves Grangemouth really in a very poor condition. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you for that input. Is somebody going to come in, Mrs Geisler, are you going to come in and maybe respond to some of the issues concerned there?
I will if I can, Provost. I think that the issue of the restricted opportunities within Grangemouth for new housing is something that has vexed us all over a while, and you've mentioned some of the restrictions there, particularly around the consultation zones, which make identifying new housing opportunities very difficult. I think what we have to do in Grangemouth is use, as you say, use any tools that are at our disposal and to approach this in a joined-up way, which I think we are doing. The work that's been done in Zetland Park just now, you've highlighted, I think that this is obviously a Heritage Lottery funding bid. The community have been wonderful. They've really pulled together around this, and that's a focal point for an improvement in the area. I think that the reference that you make to the heritage within the area too is one upon which we can build, and we'll certainly be looking at any opportunities that there are for Heritage Lottery funding for that heritage once that's developed a wee bit further. I think there are other opportunities for us as well around Grangemouth Town Centre associated with the investment zone proposition. You'll be familiar with that. That's now coming to a stage where we'll be bringing that back to members after the recess, probably later in the year. And there are specific proposals in there for Grangemouth Town Centre, recognising that there need to be benefits coming from the investments in industry to benefit the community of Grangemouth. The other thing I would mention is that we're working with our housing colleagues to look at more innovative ways to introduce new housing into Grangemouth, and that may well be by replacing housing on existing sites. There has been new build housing in Grangemouth, as you know, delivered by the council, and I think that we just need to be a bit more creative about how we manage the sites that are suitable for housing to regenerate the housing opportunities there. So I hope you'll take some confidence from that we are, as services, approaching this in a collective way, and that we are working closely with stakeholders to develop some very significant plans for Grangemouth. I'd also make reference to the Making Places work that's been undertaken as well there. With Dermot Lawler, you may know of that work as well, where the community has been consulted very widely on what it wants to see coming forward in Grangemouth, and that will feed into the investment zone proposition that I've referred to already.
Could I just have a wee bit further clarification about why the Bus 13 area is not suitable for housing? Can you pick that up?
I think there are health and safety restrictions on that site, so housing is a more sensitive use than industry, so it's in a zone where housing would be problematic. I think also there's in terms of its integration with the town, with the residential part of the town, I think you know that there's probably an issue with that as well, and that you've got that, the very, very busy A905 between that site and the town proper. But I think it's principally about the major hazard zones and the associated consultations zones.
Is there no way that we could put it in, because it doesn't sound like the problems are insurmountable, and it would be another piece of land where we could put houses?
I think it would prove very problematic for officers to recommend its inclusion, given the difficulties associated with the consultation zones. And that's a reason for not putting it in. However, what I would say to you is this plan will now go forward for public examination, and any representations that have already been made will be considered by the reporter at that time. So there will be an opportunity for that to be considered by the reporter.
Yes, Provost, as the report quite correctly points out, it's not the time to suggest any major amendments. My questions really are to push back the boundaries of my own England's, to be honest. Homes for Scotland, I'm not aware of that organisation, but they appear regularly. It's not a government body, is it?
It's a representative body for the house building industry, effectively.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like a.
Yeah, they lobby. The house builders are members of it, and it lobbies on their behalf.
Okay, I thought it might be. I noticed in one part the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have made representations about the decline in the number of houses to be built. is that in particular reference to the Maddiston site? Or it seems strange that they're a consultee in that regard.
Yeah, I think their representation is entirely tied in with their interest in that, in the Maddiston Fire Station site, and their desire to promote that for housing.
Right. Another one of our community planning partners is the college. I noticed they're looking for 230 houses rather than 200 on the site at I suppose the present college, the old college.
Yes, I mean we put in indicative capacities for these sites, and until a detailed master plan has been done, we don't know the exact capacity. But we feel, based on our knowledge of the site, that 200 is a fair capacity. It may be that the site can take more, but they'll have to demonstrate that through a suitable master plan.
I'm sure, like many other members, that I'm getting a bit worried about the density of some estates that are being built at the moment. They're looking quite ugly. The one to the south of Bowness is, I've got to say, a good example of possibly a bad example. I take it planning has a measurement of how many houses per hectare.
I think we don't operate strict density restrictions. We look at it's a design-led approach. Effectively, we look at the quality of the design. We've got design criteria which we apply. Sometimes denser design doesn't necessarily mean poorer design. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't.
I think these, as Alistair said, are indicative numbers. But one of the key elements of the master plan for the Surplus College site that we want to see is to make sure that we protect the green link to take us from the helix right to the town centre, and therefore that's probably why we're being a wee bit cautious to make sure that because there'll be a part of the site that will require to integrate that, and we don't want that to be compromised in any way. It may well be that, as Alistair says, when we get to the detailed master plan, the detailed design stage, there is a greater capacity on the site, but particularly because of that, that's one of the reasons I think we're being cautious about the numbers.
Okay. I'm reluctant to stick my nose into other people's words, so I apologise to my colleagues, but I think they'll share the same concern that particularly conspicuous site is a dense housing site in its approach into Falkirk. That'd be the case. The final point is on the distillery down at Grand Sable. I've read it several times and I still don't understand the change. Could it be explained to me? Obviously, we want to enable the development as far as possible without offending planning regulations. Is what's proposed of help to the developer?
When the matter came before the council back in August, the council made changes to try and assist the developer to create greater flexibility, and that was essentially to create to make it a proposal in the plan, and that remains the situation. What the particular party is additionally looking for is for the site to be removed from the greenbelt, and I think that betrays a misunderstanding of how greenbelt works. We don't just cut holes in the greenbelt when we create development. It's a blanket. There is development in the greenbelt. That's the way greenbelt works. It's only major settlements that are excluded from the greenbelt. So it wouldn't. It just wouldn't fit with our understanding of greenbelt.
Of course,
I think the modification that was made by members in August should allow the developer to achieve the aspiration without the need to do anything with the greenbelt.
Just as you know, the race is on at the moment, and if Rosebank's got off to a flying start, yes, okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, we'll go back. You want to wind up, Councillor Alexander? Are you quite happy everybody's agreed to?
Provost, I've actually got a question.
Oh, you've got a question? Never saw your light. Yep. Oh, there was another one. It's tremendous. Okay, thank you, Councillor Nimmo. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. My question is in relation to page 45, item 23, under the mineral policies. If you read the middle box, it's asking for a presumption against fracking to be included within the policy. Is that something that we're actually being asked to agree here today?
Clarified, Mrs. Geisler.
There have been a number of representations in respect of fracking around conventional oil and gas extraction on both sides. Basically, our position is that we have the Scottish planning policy retains a criteria-based approach to this, and we have to follow that. So, and that's in spite of the moratorium on the granting of planning permission for these applications at the moment. And really, we just have to follow Scottish planning policy, and we're doing that at the moment. It may be that in its next iteration, Scottish planning policy will change to reflect the government's views on this, in which case we will follow suit. But in the meantime, we're basically sticking with Scottish planning policy, and that's really what we have to do. We have to conform with that.
So does that actually state that we should be presuming against fracking in LDP2?
No, it doesn't. No, the section you refer to, Councillor Nimmo, is a representation that has been made to us as part of the consultation process. But as Alistair says, we are pretty much lifting the SPP, Scottish Planning Policy, approach to fracking, which is a criteria-based assessment. So this is just merely describing what people have said to us. It's not describing what's in the plan on that particular page.
Thank you. Any other member?
Provost, I wonder if I may make a suggestion about if there is a large report attached to a preamble. The actual report ends at page 39, and the first page of the enclosure is 40. So when you look up the pad, it's quite difficult to work. I wonder if it would be possible to number the report 1 to 39 and then to start at 1 again with the enclosure, or is that making things more complicated? It's just difficult when one makes a reference. It's yeah.
There's definitely difficulties with this one because of the size of the
Mr. Moody.
I think yes, it's clear that they are substantial papers, and I'm just noticing myself some issues with numbering. I think that we'll take away and think about for the next time we have a similar sized document. I think we did recognise that it would be difficult for people to navigate on their iPads, and I think there was an offer sent out to all members to have a paper copy if they wanted for this occasion. So we do recognise that it's not been an easy one for members to navigate their way around, and we'll look at that just and reflect for the next time it appears.
Provost, I've got a question, but it's not. I'd rather this get finished then, just before we finish the session. I'd like to ask a question. It's just so you know that I want to ask a question.
Let's go back to the item 7. As members agreed to the recommendations contained within the report with the 2 small amendments that was already agreed. Everybody agreed to that? Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Grant, do you want a question?
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to ask Mr. Moody this question. Once again, Mr. Moody, I've asked this question before. It's on clarification about standing up when we're addressing the chamber. We've got the new microphone system. I'd just like clarification because some of us stand up, some of us don't. When I started, I was always taught when you're addressing the chamber, stand up, show respect to the Provost. That may be a bad induction, but that's what I was taught. So I'd like clarification on that, please.
I think to put matters shortly, it's a question for choice for both the officers and the members, and the Provost has issued written clarification on the position, which I think has previously been circulated to members, but I'm happy to circulate that again. I think, Provost, when you took the chair of the Council, you indicated that there was significant benefit in members and officers remaining seated for their contributions, and that was in relation to the question of audibility, because people would be closer to the microphones, and also recognising that not everyone found it easy on all occasions to stand or remain standing for periods of time. But you also, Provost, recognised that it had been a long-standing tradition that people stood, and I think in recognition of that, you said if people felt more comfortable standing when they addressed the Council, then that wasn't a problem either. So that, in summary, is the position. It remains a question of choice for both the members and the officers.
Yeah, you want to come back in?
Yes, sorry, Mr Moody, my reading of it was the Provost says that with members of the public up the back couldn't hear because the microphone system was so poor, and it would be better if we sit so that members of the public at the back could hear us. We've now went to great expense, to which thank Falkirk Council for doing it, for these new microphones. I don't think there's any excuse anymore to be seated, because the members of the public can hear us loud and clear.
Provost, I'm sure if you'll take that information into account, and if you wish to change your guidance, you will do so. But as far as I'm aware, your guidance is as previously given.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. We'll move on. Right, so we've agreed that we're now going back to the agenda. We've already had item 8. Just going through them now. We're going to item 9, which is the appointment of East Scotland European Consortium Policy Board, pages 352 to 355. Thank you. The report is by your good self, sir.
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Moody.
you, Provost. And the decision which is sought from the Council in relation to this item of business is nomination for the Council's place on the Policy Board of the East of Scotland European Consortium. A vacancy has arisen for that place, and accordingly a nomination is required from the Council.
Thank you, Provost. I would have much pleasure in nominating the economic portfolio holder, Councillor David Alexander.
Happy to second.
Okay. So we done the delegation of powers earlier on. We did the execution of deeds number 11, and we go to the motions. We had 5 notice of motions, 4 have been referred straight to the executive, and we've had consultation between the leader and the group leaders, and there is one item that will be discussed today, proposed by Councillor Reid. Thank you, sir.
I apologise to Council, but I think I would withdraw the motion. I've had talks with both senior members and senior officers. I do acknowledge that the terms of the motion are somewhat wide and specific, and it would be best to have some wiser counsel before we move on to examine standing orders. So I would ask that perhaps a report could come to the next meeting of Council. I'm particularly worried about that the standing orders haven't kept pace with the changes. There's no mention of the Council of the Future, there's no mention of the 5-year plan, so it's ever so slightly anachronistic at the moment. But I'm quite happy to wait for perhaps a more civilised way of discussing things, if that's acceptable. Yes, please.
Right, that brings us to the end to today's meeting. Just like to wish everybody, if you're going on holiday, a happy and safe time, and hopefully we'll see everybody back here in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.